A quick like and subscribe really helps our channel grow and allows us to bring you even more amazing content. Thank you for your support. I had never imagined that constructing a dollhouse would ignite such a simmering conflict between my heart and my conscience, but sometimes the lines between right and wrong blur in unexpected ways. For years, I had poured my evenings into crafting intricate projects, each requiring patience and skill. My latest endeavor was a dollhouse, a stunning replica of our own home, complete with miniature furniture I'd fashioned from scraps. I envisioned it as a delightful surprise for my niece, Lily, who was just beginning to discover the joy of imaginative play. When I finally unveiled it to my wife, Jenna, one warm Saturday afternoon, I expected her to share in my excitement. Instead, I sensed a hesitation in her eyes, a shadow of disappointment that tugged at my gut. To Jenna, this wasn't just a dollhouse, it was a reminder of the children we had been trying to have for over 3 years. It was a painful echo of hope that had turned into sorrow, the dollhouse becoming a silent witness to our unfulfilled dreams. After she walked away, I was left standing in the living room, the dollhouse perched on the table like an altar to my own conflicting emotions. I spent the next few days wrestling with how to navigate this delicate territory. Lily was such an innocent light in our lives, always brimming with energy and curiosity, her laughter a beautiful distraction from our struggles. I could easily envision her joy, radiant as she played with tiny families inhabiting the dollhouse I had designed with so much love. Yet, was it fair to give that dollhouse to her, now knowing it could unintentionally deepen the hurt in my wife? Each night, I tried to compartmentalize my feelings, but guilt would creep in each time I envisioned Lily's bright smile. Jenna and I had our discussions about starting a family, and although they were often laced with hope, they were equally filled with anxiety and uncertainty. The pain of loss was ever present, and I had never seen Jenna more vulnerable than when we talked about what it meant for our future. As the weekend neared, the veiled tension between us grew palpable. I would catch Jenna staring at the dollhouse with a mix of longing and regret, almost as if it had taken on a life of its own, weaving its way into the fabric of our unspoken struggles. Each time she looked away, I felt a pang of guilt, followed by a sudden urge to lock it away, to spare her feelings. But then I heard Lily's laughter echoing in my head, and I could almost picture her tiny hands carefully adorning the dollhouse with her imaginative touches. This created an inner conflict that kept me tossing and turning late into the nights. Finally, it came to a head at dinner one evening. We had both been quiet, lost in our thoughts, when I finally broke the silence. "What if I gave the dollhouse to Lily?" I proposed gently, gauging her reaction. It was like I had flipped a switch. Jenna's eyes snapped to me, fraught with an intensity I hadn't seen in days. "Is that really what you want?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, loaded with an incredulous sting. "Can it be both? Can it be a gift for Lily? But also a reminder that we can still create happiness?" I tried to explain, though each word felt heavier than the last, as if I were trying to lift the weight of our unfulfilled expectations with flimsy proposals. "No, but it means something different for me," Jenna replied, her voice breaking ever so slightly. There it was, the truth unveiled. It wasn't just about the dollhouse, it was about what it represented. I finally understood, it was a connection, a vision of familial joy. I watched the gravity of the moment settle between us like dust in a sunbeam. The more we talked, the more I realized that perhaps it wasn't merely an Ida scenario, it was about understanding, empathy, and navigating the tender landscape between love and loss. In the days that followed, I found myself standing before the dollhouse with a new perspective. I decided to give it to Lily but framed it differently. I crafted a small card to attach, explaining how it was built with love that could be shared, allowing Jenna to be part of that joy, yet giving me the strength to watch her smile grow brighter as our niece played. When I finally presented it to Lily, the sheer delight in her eyes made the choice worthwhile. Yet in the back of my mind, I knew that this dollhouse would always stand as a subtle reminder of our journey. It turned out that many months later, as I gifted another project to our niece, I was surprised by a simple email that Jenna sent after one of her late-night musings. "Remember that dollhouse? Lily still plays with it and loves how it looks just like our house," she wrote. "Maybe we can make that dollhouse a reality someday." And in that moment, the ache we had lived with seemed a little less heavy. The illusion had transformed into a dream, reminding us both that love, in all its forms, was something still worth building. The flickering light of the candles danced on the walls of our living room as I sat back in my chair, reminiscing about the work I had poured into that dollhouse. Each miniature detail represented not just a collection of wood and paint, but the fragments of our life together, the cozy living room with its tiny couch and absurdly intricate wallpaper that Jenna had picked out, or the kitchen with its miniature utensils that reminded me of the countless evenings we'd spent cooking side by side. It was here, in this quiet space, that I began to value those memories even more as a reflection of the love we had built amidst the uncertainty of our earlier years, a true testament to resilience. As I sipped my tea, I thought about that email. Hearing that Lily, my niece, enjoyed the dollhouse so much reignited a flicker of warmth in my chest. It felt incredible to know that the labor of love and creativity had not only honored mine and Jenna's story but had also bonded Lily with the very essence of our lives. She was transforming those memories into her own adventures. It was a bridge connecting the past and the present, reminding us that happiness could still bloom amid the challenges. Yet, as night settled in and the stars blinked into existence outside, the familiar sensation of guilt drifted back in, like an unwelcome guest at my door. Did I make the right decision by giving the dollhouse to Jenna and not to Lily? Though initially, it felt right to honor my wife's role in my life and the sacrifices she had made, I couldn't help but feel that perhaps I'd robbed Lily of something special. Did I inadvertently create a schism between their relationship, where my decision perhaps felt like an unintentional rejection of her place in my life? Jenna, perceptive as always, sensed my unease. She slipped onto the couch beside me, her warm presence shifting the air to a more comforting space. "You okay?" she asked quietly. Her voice was laced with a gentle empathy that made it easy to confide in her. The steady rhythm of my heartbeat seemed to sync with the flickering light of the candles as I let out a heavy sigh. "I've just been thinking about the dollhouse," I admitted, my voice almost a whisper against the backdrop of the softly crackling flames. "I hope I didn't make the wrong choice by not giving it to Lily." Jenna smiled knowingly and took my hand, intertwining her fingers with mine. "You gave her something even more valuable than the dollhouse," she replied softly. "You gave her the example of building a life filled with love and creativity. You showed her that our family can create and share beauty, and that she can dream of building something of her own one day too." Her words washed over me like the gentle embrace of a wave, reassuring me that our decision was not only justifiable but also imbued with a depth of understanding that transcended simple material gifts. It was an investiture, no longer a mere dollhouse, but a symbol of our shared journey, intertwined with the hopes we had for our own family as well. The next morning struck with the warmth of a new promise, and I found myself compelled to reach out to Jenna again. It was time we brought something to life that would encompass our love and hopes for the future, a project that could merge my skills and our dreams, into something tangible. We bounced ideas back and forth across the breakfast table, laughter slipping out between bites of toast, imagining a new dollhouse, this one a miniature embodiment of everything we envisioned for Lily, but with our fingerprints all over it. Weeks sped by, and slowly but surely, as if we were crafting our story one step at a time, the dollhouse began to take shape. "What if we include a tiny version of the tree in our yard?" I suggested during one evening of construction, the air heavy with the scent of sawdust and varnish. Jenna leaned closer, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm as she devised clever ways to incorporate even more details. Every piece of wood we selected, every color we mixed, felt like an affirmation of our love, a quiet promise that the foundation of the dollhouse echoed our values. On the day we finished, we stood side by side, letting the weight of our work seep in as we admired the end result. The miniature dwelling glowed warmly in the light of the setting sun, and it suddenly struck me that we hadn't just crafted a dollhouse, we had built a tangible connection that bridged the love we shared with Lily. We decided to keep it a surprise, planning to unveil it at our next family gathering, where we would finally present a reflection of our journey to the next generation. As I lay in bed that night, my heart felt unburdened at last. The ache I had once felt had turned into something soft and bright, filled with the knowledge that love, especially when shared and woven into the lives of those we cherish, expands beyond what we originally envisioned. In its own unique way, it branches out, like a tree that steadily bears fruit as it grows, and I knew, just as the ideal dollhouse stood as proof of our journey, so, too, did our story continue to blossom with each passing day. Update: several weeks later, after that surprise unveiling filled with delight and tears of joy, Jenna and I received a touching message from Lily. "Thank you for the cozy dollhouse. It makes me so happy. I hope we can always build amazing things together." It reminded us that sometimes, the act of creation is as important as the creations themselves, and the love we pour into these projects only fosters deeper connections with those who matter most. The days that followed were filled with a gentle warmth that radiated from both our home and our hearts, an unspoken promise that we were stepping into a new chapter of our lives together. Jenna, ever the thoughtful one, began leaving little surprises around the house, an unexpected note tucked into my lunch, a small bouquet of wildflowers on the kitchen counter in the morning. It was her way of reminding me that while the past had its weight, the present could still be woven from joy and love. One weekend, we decided to take a trip to an artist's market down near the waterfront. I remember the vibrant colors of handmade pottery and the sounds of laughter drifting through the air as we wandered together, hand in hand. We stumbled upon a stall filled with little wooden figurines, each one hand-carved and painted with such care that they seemed to squeeze their way into your heart. Jenna picked up a small family set, a father, a mother, and 2 children. "They remind me of us," she said, a soft smile dancing on her lips. It was true, they felt like tiny echoes of our hopes and dreams for the future. We purchased them on a whim, and as we carried them back to the car, I found myself struck by the thought that every piece we gathered was another thread in the tapestry we were weaving together. The months slipped by in a blissful blur, and each week, Lily would fill our home with her laughter as she came over to play. The dollhouse had become her sanctuary, and Jenna and I often found her tucked away, deep in imaginary worlds she created with her tiny figurines. I caught glimpses of their adventures, a family picnic with the little wooden parents and their even smaller children, elaborate tea parties hosted by the family of dolls, and sometimes even the family making a trip to the beach in another imaginative play. It was enchanting to witness, like watching a painter fill the empty canvas of childhood's imagination. There was a day I returned home after a long week at work, feeling the weight of the world pressing on my shoulders. As I entered the house, I was greeted by the soft sounds of laughter echoing from the living room. I made my way there, and nothing could prepare me for the scene that unfolded. There was Jenna, seated on the floor, surrounded by colored paper, scissors, and remnants of drawings. And there was Lily, her eyes bright, fully immersed in crafting furniture for the dollhouse they had decided needed upgrades. The sight sent a wave of warmth through me. I stood there for a moment, quietly observing, allowing the tranquility of the moment to wash over me, a testament to the connections being nurtured in our little home. As that evening drew to a close, I couldn't help but think about the journey we had taken, the transitions, the trials, and ultimately, the love that had stitched us back together. With Lily beside her, Jenna looked up and smiled at me. "You have to see what we've made." In that moment, the burdens I had carried felt lighter, and the future stretched before us like an open road. Perhaps the dollhouse was not merely a beautiful construction, but rather a symbol of resilience and creativity flourishing between generations. That night, we gathered around the dining table, sharing laughter and stories, Lily's wide eyes lighting up as she recounted the adventures of her dolls. She was always the mischievous little sister in her tales, and we hung on her every word, savoring the sweetness of her imagination. Reflection on that whirlwind of emotions led me to realize, love, like creativity, is built with both care and time, and sometimes the best creations aren't the ones we see before us, but the memories we craft and the bonds we strengthen. As I watched Jenna and Lily hunched over their paper crafts, I understood that every moment we spent building something together, be it in the form of a dollhouse or in the quiet moments of everyday life, was a precious thread in the rich tapestry of our existence. And as the sun dipped gently below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow across our home, I whispered a silent promise to myself, to always build, to always share, and to never forget the courage it took to embrace love in all its beautiful, messy forms. It was a quiet Saturday morning when the email arrived, its subject line gleaming like a neon sign in my inbox, "Birthday party invite." My heart sank slightly, not because the party itself was unwelcome, but for the title attached to it, Ava's 10th birthday bash. You see, Ava, my only daughter, had been living with her mother since our bitter divorce 2 years earlier, a divorce that had taught me both the depths of heartbreak and the importance of fighting for what is right. We had agreed on shared custody and tried our best to keep things cordial for her sake, but time had dulled the edges of our cooperation. Excitement mixed with unease brewed in my chest as I opened the email. In it, Ava's mother, Sarah, had laid out the details of the party she was throwing at her new boyfriend's house, complete with a rented bouncy castle and a promise of cupcakes that were to die for. I smiled at the thought of my daughter laughing with her friends, but the invitation felt like a bitter reminder of the distance that now existed between us. I hadn't been included in the planning, had no input on who was invited, or, more importantly, whether I would be invited to join the festivities. Memories of exchanges between us about joint decisions flooded my mind, laced with that familiar bitterness. I remembered that time we argued fiercely about what to tell Ava during family discussions, how quickly we'd gone from discussing her future to fights over holiday weekends. I took a deep breath, letting the air settle before replying. "Dear Sarah," I typed, "thank you for the invitation. However, I frankly feel conflicted about taking Ava to her party. I paused and blinked at the screen, wondering if I was overthinking this, my finger hovering above the send button. Would I be the asshole for refusing? Would I be denying my daughter joy? After some deliberation, I hit send, feeling both a thrill of liberation and a hint of regret. In a matter of hours, Sarah replied, her words sharp and dismissive. "You're being ridiculous, Matt. Ava needs to see both her parents celebrating her birthday. You can't keep trying to be a martyr." Her words struck like an arrow, and I fired back an equally heated response, caught in that deteriorating cycle of miscommunication where nothing ever seemed to get resolved. The conflict pushed me into an emotional spiral as I questioned my role in Ava's life. I could hear her laughter over the phone on weekends we spent together, see the delight in her eyes during our shared trips to the park and the thrill of watching movies on lazy afternoons. I wanted to fight for that connection without it feeling like a battlefield, yet Sarah's reluctance to compromise left me feeling vulnerable and unsure. Days passed without further correspondence, and my anxiety turned into a persistent ache in my chest. Each moment spent in silence echoed louder than the last, leaving me haunted by thoughts of Ava blowing out her candles without me there to cheer her on. The night before the party, I lay in bed, wrestling with my choices. My mind raced back to those fleeting moments of happiness we once shared, grasping for a glimmer of hope. I recalled our annual rituals, how we made her birthday a grand occasion, replete with silly games and heartfelt surprises. I longed for us to return to that simple joy, the laughter shared between family, but reality painted a different picture, one of estranged relationships and unspoken grievances. In the early hours of the morning, I finally decided to call Sarah, feeling resolute. I dialed her number, the sound of it ringing echoing like a drumming heartbeat. "Hey," she answered, her voice clipped and guarded. "I know it's early, but can we talk?" I asked, choosing my words with caution. Her sigh broke the silence, a long-held breath released into the phone. We exchanged our feelings, our resentments, an emotional tug-of-war of apologies and accusations, laying bare the path that had led us down this difficult road. After what felt like an eternity of talking, I reached a tranquil point of acceptance. "I want Ava to be happy," I finally said. "I just want to feel included in her life, even if it's complicated." There was a pause filled with vulnerability on the line before Sarah softly spoke. "Let's make sure she knows we're both here for her. You can come to the party, I want her to have both parents in her life." The relief that flooded through me was overwhelming, like a drowning sailor finally surfacing to breathe. The next day, I arrived at the party, unsure of what to expect, my heart pounding not from fear, but from nervous anticipation. As I stepped into the backyard, the sound of laughter enveloped me, and I saw Ava, dressed in a vibrant pink dress, her smile widening as she spotted me. It felt as if time stood still, and in that moment, I knew I had made the right decision. There were still obstacles to navigate, shared custody would always be a delicate dance, but we were trying our best, learning along the way, brick by brick, to rebuild the trust that had been lost. As I watched her blow out her candles, surrounded by friends and family, I realized the most valuable gift of all was the experience of unity, the warmth of love shared, even amidst distance and misunderstanding. A part of me still questioned if I had been wrong in sending that initial email, or if my bravado had cost me opportunities, but in Ava's shimmering eyes, I saw hope, and I knew I was no longer alone in this journey. Update: a few weeks after the party, Sarah and I had started attending a family counseling session. It was one of those stepchild scenarios in the modern age, a tug-of-war between two parents still grappling with recent wounds. Upon recommendation from the counselor, we embarked on this journey together, to communicate better, to understand each other as co-parents. We even laughed about the birthday debacle, realizing it had been a miscommunication wrapped in hurt feelings. In the end, what mattered was that through our trials and tribulations, Ava was thriving, and it urged us towards newfound cooperation, building bridges rather than walls. The journey was ongoing, but for the first time, it felt like I was no longer standing at the edge, but rather stepping gently onto the path ahead, guided by the laughter of a child who would always remind me of the beauty of resilience and love. As I settled into this new chapter of co-parenting, I found myself reflecting often on those tumultuous months leading to Ava's last birthday. The air in our home had shifted, it no longer felt heavy with unspoken grievances but rather light with the potential for mutual understanding. I vividly recalled the night after we had come to our resolution, how we huddled together in the living room, the flickering candlelight casting warm shadows as we all laughed at old family videos. The laughter of Ava, ringing clear and joyous, was infectious, her innocence a gentle reminder that often our adult worries seem trivial in her world. With her small hand clasped tightly in mine, I realized how simple life could be when it was guided by love and honesty, and I could only hope that this newfound warmth would continue to envelop us as we all navigated our separate but intertwined lives. Despite everything, those moments of vulnerability led to deeper conversations with my ex-wife, Rachel. I had always respected her as a co-parent, but now I appreciated her humanity in ways I hadn't before. Our late-night discussions flowed naturally, each of us peeling back layers of our hearts that we had long held concealed, all because of that one birthday party. It astonished me how a single event, one that had felt so incredibly pivotal at the time, could pivot the course of our co-parenting journey so dramatically. We learned to reach out to each other more, to share our anxieties about Ava's growth, her school, and her relationships with friends. Most importantly, we took turns checking in, not just on Ava, but on ourselves, too. This, in turn, opened a door to discussions about how we wanted to celebrate Ava's next birthday. Instead of leaping into a full-blown party with all the trimmings, we decided to involve her in the planning. One evening, I found an old box filled with colorful craft supplies and, just like that, an idea was born. With a few art supplies and her unfiltered imagination, Ava took to planning her birthday like a seasoned event organizer. I smiled while looking at her sketches of a backyard picnic, whimsical animals made from recycled paper, and an entire theme dedicated to her favorite fairy tale characters. Rachel and I shared fond gazes, both proud and a little amused by our daughter's youthful ambition. We both knew she had inherited our tendency to elaborate far beyond what was necessary. As the day approached, what struck me most was the undeniable camaraderie building between Rachel and me. The only struggle left was to find a suitable day when our schedules aligned, which, surprisingly, we accomplished without any friction, something I would have previously thought impossible. Ava's birthday party arrived, and the day was as enchanting as she had envisioned it. We sat beneath the sprawling oak tree in our backyard, a haven of green and gold light, the air thick with the aroma of freshly baked cupcakes and the sound of laughter. Friends began to trickle in, and I felt a sense of relief wash over me as I watched Ava greet her guests with open arms. That familiar feeling, a blend of pride, love, and connection, blanketed everything that day, allowing me to recall the essence of our family, not the struggles but the resilience that woven us together. As the sun dipped, painting the sky in shades of orange, red, violet, I found myself smiling at Rachel across the yard. In that moment, no bitterness echoed between us. Just the simple joy of shared laughter intertwined with parental pride, a strange yet welcomed friendship that had grown from the ashes of our previous disagreements. When the last guest left, we both plopped down on the grass beside Ava, who had just begun to doze off, her face flushed with happiness. "You think she had a good time?" Rachel asked, her voice a soft murmur punctuated by the leaves whispering overhead. "I think she loved it," I replied, glancing down at my daughter, whose dreams must surely have been filled with whimsical adventures. As dusk settled in, it dawned on me just how much had changed. We exchanged a knowing look, words unspoken but shared between us, an understanding that sometimes miscommunication had the power to destroy and to strengthen. My heart swelled with hope, and in that luminous twilight, I firmly believed that through this journey of vulnerability, forgiveness, and growth, we were continually transforming, not just as parents but as individuals striving to give our daughter the best of ourselves. I looked at Ava, her tiny fingers clutching a party favor, and realized that it was the laughter, the love, and the resilience that truly mattered. The path we walked would undoubtedly have its rocky moments, but it was a road I felt ready to tread, knowing I was not alone. And with that reflection nestled close to my heart, I whispered a silent vow to embrace the unfolding future with open arms and a heart full of hope. Update: just a few months later, life took an unexpected turn once again. Rachel had recently mentioned she was considering moving to a nearby city for a fantastic job opportunity, something she had always dreamed of but hesitated to pursue. Her desire eventually put us in the position of needing to recalibrate our co-parenting arrangement. Yet this time, it felt different. Rather than spiraling into anxiety over potential conflicts, we sat down again, just like before, and talked it through. Rachel expressed her concerns about how a move might affect Ava, and I shared my worries about how it would affect our bond as a co-parenting team. Our open dialogue, now woven through trust, made all the difference. We both welcomed the idea of working together, ensuring Ava felt anchored no matter how far she or either of us traveled. Love may have its complexities, but through it all, I learned the most valuable lesson of all, that understanding and communication were the threads that held our family together, no matter the distance. As the weeks rolled into months, the lessons we learned lived with us, blossoming in the everyday moments of parenting. Rachel and I found ourselves sharing more than just birthday plans. We were navigating the intricacies of co-parenting with a newfound sense of unity. It was during these quieter moments, those unguarded conversations over the phone or the casual exchanges when we dropped off Ava, that I realized our relationship was stabilizing. One afternoon, while the sun poured through the kitchen window, I was prepping lunch when Ava ran up to me, her tiny feet barely making a sound on the polished floor. With a big smile, she held out a crayon drawing depicting a sprawling family tree with Rachel and me as the roots, strong and intertwined, and our branches reaching out to represent her growing circle of friends and family. My heart swelled as I realized how much she understood, even if her comprehension was wrapped in innocence. "See, Daddy? Even if we don't live together, we're still a family," she chirped, her eyes sparkling with belief. I couldn't help but feel gratitude for that childlike clarity, the kind that often eludes adults. In that moment, I understood the importance of fostering Ava's perception of love. She was the lens through which our past struggles were being reframed. Rachel and I decided to introduce a weekly family night, where the three of us would indulge in activities ranging from movie marathons to board games, each session acting as a reminder of our commitment to Ava. As the weeks turned into playful banter and warm evenings of laughter, I started to feel a sense of normalcy that had once eluded us. One evening, after a particularly spirited round of charades where Ava had us all rolling on the floor, Rachel turned to me with a smile. "I guess this is what it means to build a family," she said. There was no hint of bitterness or past grievances, just the simple acknowledgement of what we were creating together. But life, in its unpredictable manner, threw a curveball our way. Rachel received an unexpected job opportunity that required her to relocate across the country. I was taken aback, my initial reaction awash with the fear of change. Ava adored her routines. Would this disrupt everything we had built together? When I approached Rachel about it, my usual calm facade cracked. "How can we maintain this?" I stammered. "What if it pulls Ava between us?" Rachel listened intently, her face a mixture of emotions, reflecting my own fears back at me. The weight of our earlier promises weighed heavily on us both. I could see the reality of her move grappling with our newfound understanding. We took the weekend to exhaustively discuss everything, a process that felt both laborious and liberating as we laid all our concerns on the table. The fear of creating instability in Ava's life loomed large, but the prospect of Rachel's career growth was undeniably an opportunity that was hard to frown upon. Slowly, we began to explore what that transition might look like. It's amazing how the words we exchanged began to heal the initial shock, transforming my apprehensions into conversations about alternating weekends and phone calls. We envisioned crafting a schedule that would prioritize Ava's needs, and here was where Rachel's earlier point about communication shone again. The idea was for her to be rooted in both our hearts, irrespective of geographical lines. With every discussion we had, I felt the fabric of our co-parenting strategy become more intricate yet resilient. The decision was ultimately made: Rachel would take the job, and we would commit to a communication plan that would keep any rift at bay. The weeks leading up to her departure were packed with emotional farewells, open dialogues again, and loads of reinforcement for Ava. I felt bittersweet pride as I watched Rachel and Ava playing together in the park one last time before the move. A fleeting moment of nostalgia swept through me. I thought of all the birthdays, the small squabbles, and those beautiful family nights. "We're still a family, right?" Ava asked innocently, her voice filled with concern. I knelt down, unafraid to share my heart. "Absolutely, sweetheart. No matter where we are." It felt true to the depths of my soul, and she smiled, radiating the reassurance of a child's uncomplicated wisdom. As I drove home that day, the weight lingered, but it felt so different now. Sundays would be our pocket of time to celebrate culture through shared meals, FaceTiming during story time, and sending messages across the miles, maintaining our rhythm. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of clarity wash over me. I could not predict what our family's dynamics would look like moving forward, but I had faith that as long as love anchored us, we would flourish. In the end, distance could not dilute what we had built. Through all the anxieties and adjustments, I knew that understanding, grace, and persistent love would knit us together, no matter the miles apart. After all, family is less about physical proximity and more about the bonds we choose to nurture with each other, and as I lay down that night, I felt grateful for the tangled, beautiful journey we were embarking upon together, knowing that Ava would always be our guiding star, reminding us of the resilience that love inspired. The sun was dipping below the horizon as I sat on my porch, a cup of chamomile tea warming my hands and the gentle rustle of leaves filling the quiet air. It was one of those evenings when the world felt still, a perfect backdrop for the thoughts swirling in my mind about my sister, Kathy, and her unusual fixation on her new child. She had been so ecstatic when she announced her pregnancy, and even now, weeks after little Milo's birth, the whole family was under the spell of this newborn. Everyone, it seemed, except me. As I sipped my tea, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, not with Milo, but with the way Kathy was treating him. The moment I stepped into her house for the first time post-delivery, I was hit with a wave of bizarrely exaggerated decor dedicated to him. Photos plastered across the walls, his name in neon lights above a crib that seemed more like a museum piece than a place for sleeping. It felt less like celebrating a life and more like a personal art installation from Kathy that demanded to reclaim the attention she had always been dependent on. I could recall something each time I visited, the wild comments rolling off her tongue, like how she believed Milo was destined for greatness, as if he were already writing the next great American novel from his crib. Wincing at such pressure woven into a life that was only just beginning, I wondered if anyone else saw the disconnection behind her infatuation. It all came to a head during this one family gathering. The air was thick with a mix of laughter and baby cooing when it slipped out, an offhand remark from me in a moment of terrible impatience. I had meant it lightly, but the words spiraled beyond my control. "Kathy, I know you love him, but I don't think a plastic doll counts as a real baby." Her face had drained of color, and the entire room went silent, eyes darting back and forth between us. I could hardly breathe, the shocking realization of what I had said crashing over me like a wave, and suddenly I was the villain in everyone's tale. Kathy's hands trembled as she held Milo close to her, a line of protectiveness flaring to life. I watched her posture close in, her expression blackening like a storm cloud. "What do you mean, a doll? He's my baby," she retorted, her voice sharp yet fragile, as if the words were made of glass. I stammered a half-hearted apology, fumbling with my thoughts in the face of her hurt. Part of me felt guilty for not taking her obsession seriously, but another part boiled with frustration. I loved her, and I wanted her to step back from this illusion, this almost delusional state she had created around motherhood, a base trust built on the genuine nurturing that true parenting demanded. Over the next couple of weeks, my life became a tangle of texts from family members asking if I was okay, trying to convince me to apologize profusely, or shaming me for my insensitive comment. Meanwhile, Kathy retreated into herself, avoiding me during family dinners, which just made the entire situation more awkward. I couldn't help but feel a swell of loneliness, like a haze settling over me. I kept fixing our broken relationship in my mind, pondering how I could ease her back to reality without jeopardizing our bond. Finally, in a moment of clarity amidst the fog of my anxieties, I sat down with a pen and paper. I wrote Kathy a letter, pouring out my heart in the way I couldn't face her directly. I told her I saw the mother in her, the love she poured into her baby, but that I worried she was losing the chance to be present in Milo's life by creating a world that felt unreal. A few days later, she responded. The letter was heartfelt, thick with emotion, but she'd woven in threads of defensiveness, describing how she felt so much pressure as a new mother to get everything right. I understood then that she wasn't just immersed in an illusion for my sake but for herself, a desperate attempt to claim identity in a role that felt immense and overwhelming. We met afterward at the park, the crisp air bringing fresh hope as I walked alongside her, both of us with our insecurities and tenderness laid bare. I promised to support her, to be there through the chaos and sleepless nights, and as we laughed at the ridiculousness of plastic dolls in the middle of our shared parental journey, I felt the aching distance begin to disappear, with the first baby steps toward reconciliation. "So, was I the asshole?" I asked her gently, needing to know if I had crossed a line too far. She shook her head, her lips curling upwards into a soft smile. "No, just a blunt sister who cares too much." In that moment, the weight I had carried began to lift, crafting an opening through which trust and love could flow again. We didn't have all the answers, but we had each other, real and raw, ready to navigate this strange world of parenting together, one imperfect step at a time. A few months later, reflecting on that night, I found that Kathy had truly embraced the chaotic journey of motherhood. She had filled her home with memories instead of just decorations, and I often caught glimpses of her laughing at some mess Milo had made, remembering how quickly life can be both beautiful and exhausting. It was a reminder of the deeper roots of connection, real or metaphorical, the bond that continued to thrive despite the heated moments, rendering the word asshole a distant afterthought on our shared journey of love. As I settled into bed that evening, I took a deep breath, allowing the warmth of family and the nature of recovery to weave into my dreams, knowing that the true beauty of life lies in our imperfections. The next few days passed in a gentle blur, each moment blending into another like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. My thoughts danced between the sweet laughter of my niece and the shadows of that sharp confrontation with my sister. Sipping coffee in my small kitchen, I let my mind wander as I watched the rain streak against the window, imagining the little milestones I expected Milo to reach. And then, as if the universe cottoned to my neglect and acknowledging the unresolved feelings swirling inside me, my phone buzzed, pulling me back to reality. It was a message from Claire, one of those whimsical updates she loved to send, featuring a video of Milo clutching at a stuffed giraffe while gurgling pleasantly. Despite the swirling conflict that had weighed on my heart, I couldn't help but smile at the sight of him, his innocent joy begging for love and attention. As the days rolled on, I found myself reflecting deeply about what had transpired between my sister and me. It wasn't just her intense love for Milo that prompted the conflict, it was my own feelings of disconnection and discomfort. I hadn't held a baby in years. I had no framework to understand my sister's adoration, which often felt overwhelming in its intensity. Is that why I reacted so harshly? I mused, tracing the lines of the wooden table with my fingers. It was a lesson in empathy, one that demanded from me an exploration beyond the tangible, into the depths of reason and emotion. Face to face with my own vulnerabilities, I understood that I had played the role of the contrarian, perhaps attempting to temper her unyielding praise with my rational skepticism, but in doing so, I had dismissed a fundamental part of her motherhood. Later that week, I decided it was time to extend the olive branch, realizing that this misunderstanding could easily fracture our close-knit bond if left unaddressed. I invited her for a coffee in a cozy cafe perched on the corner of our neighborhood, a spot that held joyful memories of laughter and sisterly connection. As I took a seat at the small round table, my heart fluttered with a mix of remorse and courage. Claire arrived shortly thereafter, her expression betraying a mix of apprehension and curiosity. "Hey," she greeted, her eyes darting before settling on mine. A moment hung heavily between us, as if time itself was hesitating to take the next step. "Hey," I replied, motioning for her to sit. "I wanted to talk, to clear the air." She nodded, her fingers wrapping nervously around her coffee cup. The barista delivered our drinks, breaking the tension momentarily with the scent of fresh espresso and the quiet hum of cups clinking. "I feel like I hurt you when I said that thing about Milo," I began, my voice softer than anticipated as I approached the crux of our dilemma. "I shouldn't have dismissed your love for him. It's real and powerful, and it's something to be celebrated, not questioned." Her brow furrowed in contemplation. "It's just, sometimes, I feel like people don't understand," she finally admitted, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "They think because I have a different experience of motherhood, or maybe because I'm a little overprotective, it makes me less valid. I don't want you to see him like that." The air around us lightened. And I felt the walls we had built slowly begin to crumble. My heart ached for the love we shared, but also for the walls we had built in moments of misunderstanding. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Claire. I've been struggling to connect with that part of your life. I just didn't expect the reaction I had," I confessed, a tremor within the lines of my voice. It was almost cathartic to admit that I had been caught off guard by the power of her maternal instinct, and in that breath of honesty, a subtle understanding bloomed between us. She nodded, her once tense posture softening with each word exchanged. As we continued to talk, honesty ricocheting between our hearts, I felt a sense of relief I hadn't anticipated. Sharing our fears, our insecurities as sisters navigated in different realms of life, allowed us to embrace the authenticity of our experience. The conversation drifted toward lighter topics, both of us eventually finding bits of laughter woven back into our dialogue. And right before we parted, Claire leaned over and took my hands in hers, her laughter rolling like waves echoing the warmth we had built back. "Let's schedule a weekend together at my place? I'd love for you to spend time with Milo. I think he'll really enjoy getting to know his amazing aunt." When I returned home, the weight of conflict lifted significantly. I realized I had so much to learn, yet it was wonderful to resonate with the ongoing journey toward understanding. Through my sister's eyes, through her simplest joys, I could find connections twinkling in the small moments, an invitation to a new life cradled not just in love but also in the vulnerability of letting go of what I thought and embracing the reality of what truly is. Some days are beautiful messes, and I knew I had a part to play in coloring those experiences with her, as sisters and as a family. Over the following weeks, I remained intertwined with Claire and Milo's lives more intimately, engaging in every one of their innocent moments with increasing excitement. Eventually, as I lay down each night, I allowed myself moments to reflect on how beautifully tangled our lives had become. Each layer, each moment of honesty, formed an intricate tapestry of connection woven from love, understanding, and acceptance. In those peaceful reflections, intertwined with laughter and the echo of a new understanding, I found the kind of solace I hadn't known I was searching for. The realization dawned upon me as I drifted to sleep that maybe life's imperfections and challenges could incite the most profound connections, and it was those very bonds I'd built with my sister that reminded me of the remarkable tapestry of life we all share, even, and perhaps especially, when we don't fully understand each other. The morning sun broke through the curtains with a gentle glow, nudging me awake to another day intertwined with the realities of sisterhood and the enigmatic world of parenthood. As I rose from my slumber, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, beckoning me towards the kitchen where Emma busied herself, cradling Milo with one arm while stirring a pot of oatmeal with the other. The sight was almost cinematic, a perfect blend of chaos and tenderness that defined her new life. I couldn't help but smile, but a familiar twinge of guilt laced my thoughts. The previous day's confrontation hung in the air like an uncomfortable breeze, and I knew we hadn't fully wrapped up our discussion about what it meant to be a mother in her eyes versus mine. Over breakfast, our conversation flowed effortlessly at first, light-hearted remarks exchanged amid spoonfuls of oatmeal and the sporadic gurgle of Milo. But as Emma shared her latest parenting triumphs and trials, I could feel the unsaid words lingering between us, creating an important, yet unspoken, tension. Just as the atmosphere turned fragile, I watched her face transform, suddenly reflecting the worry I had seen only moments before in her laughter. "Do you really believe Milo isn't a real baby?" she asked, her voice hanging between vulnerability and defiance. My heart sank. I had never intended to undermine her journey, but the truth I spoke felt so distant from the love she poured into him. "It's not that he isn't real," I stammered, trying to tread carefully. "It's more about how we perceive these relationships. Your love for him is immeasurable, but I worry about how these expectations affect you." Her brow furrowed, and I could see the storm of emotions brewing just behind her eyes. "You think I'm playing house?" she hissed, each word a sharp shard. I could feel the ground beneath me shifting, my own heart racing as fear knotted my stomach. It was difficult to see my sister hurt, and the distance between our perspectives only widened in that moment. "No, Emma, that's not what I meant at all." My voice softened, the urgency to mend the rift propelling me forward. "I want to celebrate your bond. I see how much you love him, but I also want to make sure you don't find yourself lost in this identity." She shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "How can I be lost when I spent years dreaming of moments like these? How can you think I wouldn't know what's real?" There it was, the core of her pain, the feeling of not being understood, not being seen in the half-light of doubt I had cast over her life. I felt a wave of emotion crash over me as I searched for the right words to bridge the chasm. "I'm sorry," I whispered, feeling the sincerity of my apology wash over my words. "I'm afraid of what happens when the novelty fades and how it might feel to confront the reality of parenting. I just want to make sure you're okay." Her silence spoke volumes, a mixture of resentment, understanding, and perhaps a trace of compassion for my misplaced fear. We remained suspended in that moment until slowly, like the dawn creeping through the night, she exhaled deeply. "I appreciate your concern, but I wish you could trust me more. I'm deep in this, and it's beautiful, even if it's messy." Those words etched themselves on my heart, each syllable a reminder of the need for trust amidst uncertainty. With that, the tension began melting away as if the morning sunlight was burning through our darkness. We spent the rest of the day navigating shared moments together, plays with Milo transforming into laughter-filled bursts of joy, the kind only siblings can ignite in each other. As the hours passed, with each silly face made and every coup exchanged, I let go of the need to be right and allowed space for Emma to lead. When evening fell, and the amber dusk settled lazily outside the windows, we curled onto the couch, each cradling Milo, their hearts synchronized in a new rhythm of understanding. I held my breath as she began to sing softly, tapping into that innate bond that tied us together, unearthing things that transcended mere words. I felt a sense of clarity wash over me, reassuring me that the journey we were on was uniquely ours, regardless of how we perceived it. I realized that love exists in its many forms, and in order to embrace that love, we didn't have to understand every facet of it, we simply had to accept it. That night, as I drifted into sleep once more, I felt a deep sense of peace, a profound connection to my sister fortified by our shared vulnerabilities. The beauty of our imperfect lives felt both heavy and light, reminding me that we carry each other as we navigate through the complexities of love and identity, My heart swelled at the thought of the many future moments we would continue to craft together against the backdrop of life's ever-changing tapestry. Although I hadn't found all the answers, I took comfort in knowing that I was never alone on this journey, and perhaps that was what mattered most. The phone call came out of the blue, shattering the fragile peace I had crafted for myself and my 2 young children in the years since the divorce. "He's gone," the voice on the other end faltered, and my heart sank. It was from a mutual friend, one of the few remaining ties to a man who had once been my partner before life took us down vastly different paths. The news of my ex-husband's sudden passing brought forth a wave of conflicting emotions that crashed over me like a stormy sea: anger, grief, and even remnants of love mingled with memories of the life we built together, now reduced to echoes and ghostly shadows. My children, Jason and Lily, played quietly in the living room, unaware of the turmoil brewing just beyond their innocence. What would I tell them? Should I bring them to the funeral? As the moments ticked away, I wrestled with the thought, envisioning their little faces, so full of curiosity and imagination, grappling with something so profound as death. Eventually, I made the decision: they needed to see their father, even if it was just a final goodbye wrapped in an unfamiliar wrapping of grief and closure. On the day of the funeral, the autumn leaves fluttered to the ground, painting a poignant backdrop of gold and crimson. The church, its steeple rising into the gray sky, seemed to absorb the sorrow unfolding within its walls. I held both of their small hands as we walked through the heavy wooden doors, the hushed murmurs of relatives and friends swirling around us like fog. I could feel Jason's grip tighten, his eyes darting nervously at the sight of people dressed in black, while Lily, blissfully unaware, kept asking where her daddy was. My heart ached at that innocent question. Would it be too much for them? Would they understand why we were here? But I swallowed my doubts, reminding myself that this was as much a part of our story as the laughter we had shared. We took our seats near the front, my heart racing as the service unfolded. Each word felt like a weighted stone dropping into the pit of my stomach. Echoes of memories, both painful and beautiful, reverberated in my mind, weaving a tapestry of our shared past. The moment we stood to say our final goodbyes, it became harder. Jason leaned against me, his small shoulders shaking with suppressed emotions, while Lily reached up, eyes wide and confused, asking in a hushed voice why everyone was crying. I knelt beside her, trying to explain, but my voice caught in my throat as I remembered the last time he had held her. In that frail, intimate moment, I was struck by a pang of guilt. Was I cross-building grief for my daughters? Or was this a brave moment for them, an opportunity to learn about loss and love in its most raw form? As we placed flowers on the casket, the scent mixing with the damp air, I felt a blend of sorrow and relief. Through the pain, I saw a flicker of resilience in their eyes, a silent acknowledgement that we had each other, bonded by our grief but steadfast against the storms beyond. The funeral was a long-awaited clarity, an intricate knot being untied slowly but surely, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. When it was done, and we stepped outside, the sun broke through the heavy clouds, casting a warm glow on our faces like a quiet blessing. As we drove home, the atmosphere in the car felt strangely lighter despite the weight of the day's events. I glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing my kids fall asleep, heads leaning against each other without a care in the world. A soft hum of a lullaby from the radio melded perfectly with their gentle breathing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that perhaps I had done the right thing. I knew that the question would linger in the shadows of my mind: am I the asshole for taking them to their dad's funeral? But at that moment, I felt the weight of the world lift just a little, enough to know that perhaps this was a pivotal moment for all of us. When we got home, I tucked them into bed, kissed their foreheads, and closed their door lightly. In the quiet of the night, I reflected on our journey and the love that continued to bind us, even amid chaos. Maybe in sharing that last goodbye with their father, I taught them more about life and love than I could have anticipated. A few months later, after grappling with the grief and growing even closer as a family, I received a message from my ex-husband's sister, expressing gratitude for bringing the children to the funeral. She had shared how seeing Jason and Lily, alive and full of spirit, reminded everyone of the kindness he had in life even after the rocky years of our separation. It surprised me how much that acknowledgement lifted my spirits. And as I sat under the evening sky, watching the stars blink to life, I finally felt at peace with my decision. Through heartbreak, we had found a new, albeit different, strength, and I had come to realize that even in death, there are lessons of love we could carry forward. In the days following the funeral, I found myself reflecting on the lessons we had extracted from such a heavy experience. The gray clouds still lingered, but they had dulled, and the sun had begun to peek through them, offering a tender warmth I hadn't felt in months. Jason and Lily seemed lighter, too, their laughter echoing through our home like notes of a sweet melody that I had forgotten existed. We often held impromptu dance parties in our living room, twirling around to songs we'd collectively chosen, diving into that blissful state where worries melted away. It was during one of these dance-offs that I looked down to see their wide, carefree grins mirrored in my own, and at that moment, I realized how profoundly their father's passing had transformed our lives. What I had originally feared would unravel the fragile stitchwork of our family, his absence, was, against all odds, stitching us closer together. I thought of the days when I would speak about Jason, carefully, navigating the minefield of memories. I never belittled the complexities of our past, but as we revisited those moments, his laugh during movie nights, his ridiculous attempts at cooking, I saw my kids embrace their father's humanity. They were mourning him, but they were also celebrating the colorful imprints he had left behind. It was a complicated tapestry of memories, threaded with both pain and joy, and we were weaving it tighter each time we shared those tales. One evening, while tucking them into bed, Lily, with her big brown eyes twinkling like stars, asked if we could make a memory jar. "We can put in all the best things we remember about Dad," she said softly, her tiny fingers pulling the hem of her blanket. Jason nodded, his brow furrowed in thought, thinking of the happiest moments he could find. We grabbed an assortment of markers, colorful paper, and a simple glass jar I had kept on a shelf, dusting it off like a forgotten treasure. Night after night, we would write little stories, favorite moments, even sporadic thoughts that seemed to flash from the corners of their minds, each one a colorful reflection of their father. It felt cathartic, as though by encapsulating those memories, we were holding on to him in a way that wouldn't let go as time moved forward. Yet, there was still a lingering uncertainty in my heart. Even with the sense of community that filled my surroundings, I feared judgment. Did I make the right choice about the funeral? On an increasingly quiet evening, I found myself scrolling through social media, the old posts, the funeral photos, comments of sympathy interspersed with shared memories. Yet there it was, the muffled sting of one comment that caught my eye and twisted in my gut: "Why on earth would you bring the kids to their father's funeral?" I swallowed hard, contemplating the bluntness of it. Did I really make a grave mistake by honoring a man they had known as their father? Poking at that old wound opened up a familiar cascade of guilt. The anger crept in, too. It was unfair to project their feelings onto me. I had tried my best. As I flipped through the comments, I stumbled upon a thoughtful reply that shifted my perspective. Maybe it was a lesson in love for them, not an act of cruelty. Feeling the heaviness lift slightly, I realized I wasn't alone in this. So many parents face judgment, and for each of those harsh voices echoing in my mind, there were countless parents who had found their own way, each soldiering through their challenges, fighting battles of their own, learning to let love guide them. I closed my phone with a newfound determination and focused instead on my children who were now deep asleep, the reassuring sound of their breaths filling the room like a comforting lullaby. Weeks passed and our little family developed a new rhythm. I sometimes still encountered sporadic judgment, especially within our small town, like when I would run into familiar faces at the grocery store. Each smiled. Nod felt loaded. Sometimes, people would make small talk about the weather, while others would simply look down, avoiding eye contact altogether. Those moments were filled with undertones of unspoken words, yet they began to bother me less. I remembered why I had made the choice to bring Jason and Lily to that funeral. It was about remembering, celebrating, and finding closure, the very things we were doing in our memory jar. One day, as we were placing a new handwritten memory into the jar, a ticket stub from a concert we had attended, it struck me how much healing was packed into those tiny slips of paper. They were seeds, really, nurturing new perspectives and fostering an understanding of our past. It had opened the door to conversations about life, love, and everything in between. I knew then that whatever anyone else might say, I was right where I needed to be. And so, as the nights rolled on and our little tradition of adding to the memory jar continued, I found that it not only enclosed stories about Jason but also made space for our own emerging narrative, a story of resilience, love, and the determination to move forward while cherishing the footprints left behind. Perhaps it wouldn't heal every pang of grief, but it fortified us with a sense of purpose in honoring what remained. With each memory shared, I felt our spirits intertwine, a quiet testament that life and love would always find a way. As I sat with them wrapped in their dreams, I recognized the profound truth in that sentiment. Even amidst the chaos of our history, we had woven a tapestry of love that would only continue to grow. And perhaps with that, I wouldn't just be a survivor of our heartache, I would be a champion for the enduring bond that we shared, a reminder that even through loss, life persistently finds room for love. The days following the funeral, I found myself wandering through a landscape of emotions that felt bright yet shadowed at times. I would often catch the scent of Jason's cologne lingering on an old jacket in the closet, a bittersweet reminder of our past that pulled at my heartstrings. The kids adjusted remarkably well to the absence of their father. For them, it was a cascade of memories they could sift through, moments captured in laughter and warmth. I often found them buried under blankets as they shared stories about their favorites, the camping trips in the backyard that morphed into grand adventures or the spontaneous kitchen experiments that ended in a mess but always ended with giggles. Their joy danced around me, a soothing balm for the ache of loss, and I began to understand the true gifts Jason had left behind. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I sat with Lily and Jason at the kitchen table, painting the memories that still flickered in our hearts. We had set out a canvas, brush strokes letting each of us contribute a color or shape that represented our remembrances. I watched as they threaded together tales of camping escapades mixed with their father's goofy jokes and stories about how he'd always sing the wrong lyrics to their favorite songs. The laughter rang out like a melody, a stark contrast to the somber silence that had enveloped our home just days earlier. I could see how much they lived in those precious whirls of color and warmth, every stroke a testament to their resilience and the love that endured beyond our pain. My heart swelled with pride, a realization that even through our fragmented family, the bond we shared was vibrant and alive, creating a shelter at a time when rain threatened to wash away hope. It became clear to me that we were shaping our own narrative together now, one filled with the richness of memories and the promise of new beginnings, however uncertain they might be. This was our therapy, a way to weave Jason's essence into our lives rather than letting it vanish into silence. Every time I saw my children immerse themselves in their memories, a newfound sense of purpose washed over me. They were, in many ways, guiding me to a conclusion I hadn't been ready to face just days before. Jason had left us much more than just memories of times gone by. He had imparted lessons on how to love deeply, even when things were imperfect. As the nights rolled on, I embraced the routine of storytelling, of laughter ringing through our home, and of painting their dreams. I shared with them how loss could transform into appreciation, encouraging them to always look at the silver lining, however faint it may seem on some days. Our conversations turned from sorrow to dreams of the future, filled with wild wishes and hopes that danced in their eyes. It was in moments like these that I found clarity. The past, however tumultuous, shaped not just our pain but also our resilience and our ability to pivot, to adapt, and to rise anew. One night, tucking Lily into bed after another day of reminiscing and laughter, she looked up at me, her eyes shimmering with understanding far beyond her years. "Mom," she whispered, "maybe Daddy just wanted us to be happy. Maybe that's why he wanted us to remember the fun times and not the sad ones." Tears welled in my eyes, but they weren't tears of sorrow, they were tears of ageless wisdom being passed down, both a reflection of her father's love and her own burgeoning understanding of life. "You're right, sweetheart," I replied, pulling her close. "He wanted us to be happy, and we can honor him by living fully." As I kissed my children goodnight, a warm sense of acceptance enveloped me. I realized that Jason's death could be the end of a chapter, but it wouldn't be the end of our story. As weeks turned into months, I noticed more than just a glimmer of hope trying to burst forth in our lives. The kids began to smile more freely, and in quiet moments, they'd share funny stories about a dad who would come home with silly toys or initiate awkward dance-offs in the living room. Moments I never fully appreciated while he was there. Together we began acknowledging our pain without letting it govern our lives. Over time, I found myself at the edge of true healing, discovering that while life could be harsh, it was also beautiful, and it was our responsibility to keep it alive, to fuel it with laughter, love, and warmth. In a strange twist of fate, I became a tribute bearer of Jason's heart. And just as summer began to yield to the cool whispers of fall, I noticed an unexpected lightness in my step. It struck me one chilly evening as we roasted marshmallows in the backyard, the laughter, the camaraderie we had built, the jokes shared, this was what Jason would have wanted. We were not defining our lives by our loss, rather, we were embracing it as part of our complex tapestry. When the stars shone brightly that night, I felt the words of my children touching the strands of my heart. "Let's do this every week," Jason exclaimed as he handed me his s'more creation. "He'd definitely want us to enjoy the fun stuff." I smiled, realizing that through our journey, we would forever carry the essence of our shared past with us, not as a burden, but as a beacon, guiding us toward a future filled with love, laughter, and endless possibilities. And so, we molded a new memory each week under the stars, stitching Jason into the fabric of our lives more beautifully than I ever thought possible. Months later, as I reflected on our journey, I felt a profound sense of gratitude shape my being. Life, I concluded, like love, is an evolving narrative, an intricate dance of letting go and holding on. A few friends had reached out tentatively since the funeral, offering their condolences while hesitantly questioning my choices, but I found comfort and pride in my decision to bring the kids. It solidified our legacy and illustrated to my children the importance of accepting life's dual nature, both its joys and sorrows. With every memory painted and every moment shared, we were crafting a life that resonated not just with happiness but with an understanding that love endures, transcending even the hardest of goodbyes. And in that realization, as I moved that evening to snuff out the small fire in the backyard, I whispered a quiet promise into the night. Our future would be colored with the hues of hope, courage, and unwavering love, welcoming all the joy that life dared to send our way. I still remember the first time I walked into that small examination room, framed by pale yellow walls that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it, with a flickering fluorescent bulb that hummed overhead like a persistent ghost trying to breach the silence. As a fresh-faced medical intern, I was filled with an overwhelming mix of eagerness and anxiety, flipping through pages of notes on patient rapport and ethics while trying to remember the dozens of diseases I'd only ever read about in textbooks. I wanted to make a difference, to heal and to help. But it was during that first week that life decided to hit me with a hard truth that I could never have prepared for. I was assigned to a pediatric ward, which was both a blessing and a challenge, teeming with stories that tugged at the heartstrings in ways I was still figuring out how to process. My very first patient was a young girl named Lily, with golden curls that framed her cherubic face and a smile bright enough to fill the room. Once a ray of sunshine, she had started to dim, battling a rare form of leukemia that had robbed her of her joy and her childhood. At just 8 years old, she was grappling with the reality of her treatment, the endless needles piercing her small arms, and the isolation that accompanied her illness. I was assigned to her care, and it felt like being handed a delicate glass sculpture. I wanted to protect her, to help in whatever way I could. Yet, the weight of her vulnerability crushed me in an unexpected way. Day by day, I observed how the sterile scent of antiseptics hung in the air, intertwined with cheerful decorations on the walls that seemed to mock the gravity of her situation. Our conversations flowed like a gentle stream, with her effortlessly transitioning from her favorite animated shows to the games she missed playing outdoors. I laughed along with her, tried to adopt her innocence and optimism, but inside, I felt an ache that gnawed at my insides. My time with her was fleeting in the grand scheme of her treatment, external to the ebb and flow of what I was learning. I had never encountered this kind of emotional terrain before. How could I balance my professional responsibilities while also forming a bond that felt so achingly human? I went home each evening wondering if I should be feeling more detached or allowing myself to care deeply for this tiny soul who was learning at such a tender age that life could sometimes be cruel. Then came the day when the doctor pulled me aside, his brow furrowed under the weight of difficult words. The treatment wasn't working. Lily had developed resistance to the chemotherapy drugs they had been using. He spoke in hushed tones, outlining potential alternatives, but each option felt like more of a gamble than a safety net. I left the huddle feeling hollow, knowing I had to face her with this unwelcome truth. That evening, as I prepared myself to sit by her side, I felt a tsunami of panic wash over me. How do you explain that the medicine meant to heal her was now failing? How can one express that kind of heartbreak without shattering the fragile spirit of a child? Sitting down next to her bed, I tried to keep my tone light, but she could see through my facade. "You look sad," she said, her innocent blue eyes searching mine for answers. I opened my mouth to reassure her, but nothing came out. Her tiny hand reached out and clasped mine, an innocent gesture that ignited something powerful within me. I finally spoke, telling her that we were in this together, that she was brave and strong, but inside, my heart felt like it was breaking. I thought about the guidelines and the ethics, the tightrope that healthcare professionals are expected to walk between their emotions and responsibilities, how HIPAA measures guard our patients' privacy but often leave us feeling emotionally isolated from one another. The words echoed in my head, they prescribed distance, but how could I maintain that with a girl who truly was just a child? In the following days, as we both faced the harsh realities ahead, she began to ask me about my life, who I was, where I came from, things I never thought I would share with a patient. I found myself divulging snippets of my own story, whether about my childhood dreams or my recent hobbies, and she would eagerly respond with tales of her favorite books. In those moments, laughter would bubble between us, momentarily dispelling the heavy veil of grief that lingered over her room. Each visit became a bittersweet fusion of joy and despair, an exchange of life even on days that felt suffocatingly bleak. Yet, the inevitable happened 4 weeks later. Lily's condition suddenly worsened, and I knew deep down that we were nearing an end. I sat beside her in silence, holding her small hand, realizing that the barrier between patient and caregiver had irrevocably torn. It was during those last moments, when she looked up at me with those trusting eyes, that everything stopped. We shared a laugh, a flicker of joy amidst the heavy heartache, and she whispered, "I'll always be your friend." Just moments later, her breaths grew shallow, the beep of machines fading into a haunting lullaby. I could only grasp her hand tighter, the tears now streaming down my face as she exhaled for the last time, her little body finally releasing the burden it had carried. It broke me. I lost a piece of myself that day. I left the hospital that evening feeling heavier than I had ever felt before. I hadn't held myself together, nor did I understand how one could maintain professionalism when one's heart was so deeply entwined in the difficult fabric of a life lost too soon. And as I sat in the back seat of the cab, staring blankly at the passing street lights, the weight of the world pressed down on me, an acute reminder of what it meant to be fragile. I realized that no amount of HIPAA training or medical knowledge could prepare me for the emotional tapestry woven between healing and loss, the deep, sometimes cruel bond we form with those we are meant to care for in this life. Now, months later, I reflect on that time with Lily with a bittersweet sense of acceptance. The journey of healing doesn't always mean mending. Sometimes, it's about learning to carry the pieces of what was lost with compassion and grace. I still work in healthcare, still hold the hands of children, and every day, I remind myself of that laughter, the light she brought into even the darkest of rooms, and I know that for every heart I may break, I also have the opportunity to build bridges of connection, however fleeting they may be. Because at the end of the day, it is the love we share, even in sadness, that truly helps us heal. As I sit here, reflecting on those poignant memories, I'm reminded of a patient who brought me an unexpected lesson in love and loss. It began quietly, like a whisper of fate, when I received the case of a young boy named Ethan, a bright-eyed 7-year-old with a spirit that shone even in the confines of the hospital. The first time I entered his room, his laughter rang out like sweet music, flowing against the stark white walls adorned with cheerful drawings that filled the space with a remarkable warmth. The joy he radiated was infectious, serving as a stark contrast to the sterile environment that usually wrapped us all in its cold embrace. I was a few years into my career, passionate yet inexperienced, still wrestling with the emotional toll of caring for those in need while protecting my heart from the inevitable heartaches that healthcare often brings. Ethan had been diagnosed with leukemia, a battle he faced with the bravery of a lion, cracking jokes about his hair loss and insisting that the doctors were merely making him a little superhero ready to save the world. His resilience and ability to find light in darkness reminded me of that precious child I lost, and each bittersweet laugh of Ethan struck a chord in me. It was a delicate dance, almost like walking the tightrope of hope and fear, both wondering if I could risk getting attached while knowing he was in a precarious place. With each passing day, I would sit by his bedside, sharing stories, jokes, and even the occasional tears. It felt like a privilege to be a part of his journey, to witness a child's will to fight, to dream, even when pain threatened to pull him under. Yet, there came a day when I walked into his room, expecting the usual banter. Instead, I was met with an unsettling silence, the kind that wraps around you like fog, heavy and suffocating. On that day, Ethan's eyes were closed, a thin sheet pulled tightly over his frail body, his mom sitting beside him, cradling his tiny hand in hers. I felt that familiar pang in my chest, the fear of the inevitable, but I steadied myself, reminding myself to stay present, to honor every moment. I whispered sweet greetings, sharing tales of the outside world, of bright sunny days just waiting for him to conquer. But it was Ethan's reply that shattered me. As he opened his eyes, that spark, a fire I thought would never dim, flickered weakly. He looked toward me, and with a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "Can we still go on our adventures in my dreams? I want you to come with me." It felt like a knife twisting in my gut, ruthlessly. How could I tell a boy who had fought so valiantly that sometimes dreams are where we go to escape our realities? Instead, I smiled, and with a gentle nod, I promised him we would embark on our greatest quest yet. That night, as I lay in my own bed, wrestling with sleepless thoughts, I found myself drifting into a world of dreams. In my mind's eye, I could see Ethan and me, soaring above mountains, diving into oceans filled with sparkling fish, laughing as we sprinted through fields of swaying flowers. It was beautiful and vivid, a tapestry woven from all the joy he had shared. The following days felt like a montage, memories played in fast forward, until it was time for Ethan to say goodbye. To see his heartache mirrored in the faces of his family was solace and sorrow entwined, a bittersweet symphony I was all too familiar with. I held his hand as he took his last breaths, wishing I could take away every ounce of pain with my bare hands, pleading silently for a miracle. And when he finally drifted, his peaceful face etched in my memory, I realized this was a part of my journey, a part that I had to carry with compassion and grace. The hardest moments in our lives often shape our paths into something beautiful, something meaningful, no matter how tragic. Looking back on that chapter, I understand now that pain exists alongside joy, and healing does not equate to forgetting. I learned to wear my scars as badges that remind me of the love shared, even in fleeting moments, and how those moments can bridge what feels like an insurmountable divide. Nowadays, I pour all that I've learned into every child I encounter, sharing laughter, kindness, and a gentle presence to remind them that it's okay to be vulnerable, to embrace emotions, even the hardest ones. Because, in the end, it's not about the hearts we break, it's about the love we've given and the connections we've had, even when they remind us of what we've lost. My journey continues, and while the weight of grief never truly disappears, it has shaped me, making me more compassionate and empathetic. Life, an unpredictable and beautiful mess, brings us together, even as it tears us apart. And with every child's laughter I hear, I remember that the journey of healing is about cherishing those memories, carrying the pieces forward, and giving love as fiercely as we feel loss. Every day, I hold on to the hope that in the end, it is this love that helps us heal. Update: a few weeks after Ethan's passing, as I sat in the break room with my colleagues, a familiar face walked in. It was Ethan's mother, a visit I had not anticipated. She sparked a conversation that felt like a warm embrace, recounting stories of Ethan's joy, his love for life, and how he often spoke of our adventures and dreams. She reached out, holding my hand, tears glistening in her eyes, and said, "Thank you for seeing him, for sharing his laughter and reminding us all of the beauty in even the hardest days." In that moment, I understood, we were continuing the journey together, carrying pieces of love that transcended loss, forming a bond that would forever connect us. As we sat together in that small, dimly lit room, I could feel the weight of her gratitude pressing down on me, heavy yet sweet, like the promise of rain after a long drought. Ethan's mother, with her fragile smile, drew me back into the memories of all the times we shared with her son, his insatiable giggles echoing in the sterile air of the clinic, his mischievous antics that wove laughter into the fabric of our often somber surroundings. Each story she shared wrapped around me like a soft blanket, warming me against the chill of grief that I sometimes felt creeping at the edges of my heart. I realized then that healing isn't something we do alone, it's a community effort built on shared love and poignant moments. We spoke for hours, the outside world fading into the background as we became a safe haven for each other. She recounted the day Ethan saw the ocean for the first time, how wide his eyes grew, and how he squealed with delight as the waves danced around his tiny feet. With each story, I could see the flicker of life return to her eyes, a reminder that even in our most profound sorrow, the essence of our loved ones remains forever illuminated in the joy they imparted. In that shared vulnerability, we formed an unspoken pact, a promise to honor Ethan not just in our memory but by living fully, by embracing the joy and laughter that he once brought into our lives. As our hands remained clasped, I could feel the pulse of our connection, a lifeline forged through loss and laughter, through heartbreak and hope. As the shadows lengthened in the room and the soft glow of evening crept through the window, I sensed that this was more than just a visit, it was a turning point. We could grow together in our grief, transforming it into something beautiful and nurturing rather than allowing it to cut us off from joy. I began to contemplate ways I could honor Ethan's legacy, perhaps by organizing a small gathering for families within the hospital, creating an evening of joy where laughter could fill the air the way he once had, a butterfly flitting from one bloom to another, leaving behind traces of wonder. Leaving that day, I felt lighter, as if I had shed a layer of sorrow and found room for new beginnings. I held on to our radiant conversation, replaying her words in my mind. Even in sadness, we could stir the depths of joy. Love was not merely a memory, it was a force vibrant and alive. Days turned into weeks, and with each new sunrise, I found renewed inspiration within myself and my work. I pored over every detail of the event I was planning, wanting it to reflect Ethan's essence, a blend of creativity, imagination, and the exuberant spirit he had embodied. Finally, the night arrived, and the community gathered under a canopy of twinkling fairy lights, laughter melding with the soft sounds of night. I stood at the front, heart racing as familiar faces mingled, their smiles interspersed with bittersweet reminders of what we had lost. We filled the space with colors, balloons, painted rocks, and banners that announced the joy of living and loving deeply, something that Ethan had taught us with every smile he shared. I watched as families interacted, each tender moment a testament to connections being forged anew, and it felt as if Ethan was right there with us, his laughter curling around us like a tender embrace. That evening was transformative. It not only stood as a monument to Ethan's joy but also as an invocation of our own healing paths. As I looked around at the smiling faces, I realized how far we had all come, united through both our grief and joy. I could hear echoes of laughter that were reminiscent of the sweet sounds he once made, and it filled my heart to know we were all learning to carry those pieces together, to find joy even amidst shadows. Reflecting back, I understood that every life touched holds the potential to spark connections that ripple far beyond our immediate perceptions of loss. The memory of Ethan no longer felt like a fragile remnant of pain. Instead, it had metamorphosed into a vibrant reminder of the resistance of joy. The journey of healing doesn't always mean mending, but it most certainly means learning to carry the pieces of what was lost with compassion and grace, and for that, I will forever be grateful. Update: a few months later, I received a message from Ethan's mother. She told me that her family started a tradition of celebrating Ethan's favorite things every year, flying kites in the park on his birthday, with laughter resonating through the breeze, reminding them to cherish every fleeting moment of joy life offers. She invited me to join, and I could hardly hold back the tears that welled in my eyes. I realized then that love is never truly lost. It finds new ways to wrap around us, creating connections that bring light even in the darkest of places. As I sat on our worn-out couch, my daughter curled up beside me, her head resting on my shoulder, I could feel the weight of a secret pressing against my chest like a leaden anchor, an internal struggle I had been wrestling with since the day she was born. My name is Robert, but to her, I was simply Dad, the steadfast figure of her life, the one who cheered her on every time she took her first steps, celebrated every birthday with homemade cakes, and consoled her after heartbreaks at school. You see, I am not her biological father. I was thrust into the role when my partner, Lila, found herself pregnant after a whirlwind romance with her high school sweetheart, a man who chose to disappear into the ether when she needed him the most. In the beginning, Lila had told me about her estranged relationship with the father, and though it initially felt like a burden, I found unexpected joy in becoming a father figure to little Emma. Each day with her forged an unbreakable bond that transcended blood. Yet, as she grew, so did my fears. Every giggle we shared, every bedtime story I read, felt like sand slipping through my fingers, and the question lingered in the back of my mind: when would I have to tell her the truth? The topic weighed heavily on me, especially as Emma reached her 7th birthday, an age where the innocence of childhood ebbs away, and the world outside begins to weave its intricate web of complexities. I couldn't shake off the feeling that she deserved to know who she truly was, yet the thought of shattering her perception of what a daddy meant terrified me. One evening, while we were making homemade pizza together in the kitchen, Emma's curiosity bloomed like the dough we needed. "Dad," she asked, looking up at me with those big, innocent eyes, "why don't I look like you?" I paused, my hands momentarily frozen in motion, as countless thoughts crashed into one another. Here was my moment, the delicate thread weaving together my fears and hopes. Ignoring the knot tightening in my stomach, I chuckled nervously. "Well, honey, we're all unique, right? Like how pizza can have different toppings but still be delicious." She nodded, seemingly satisfied, but I didn't miss the glimpse of a frown crossing her tiny face, the beginnings of doubts creeping in. That night, I sprawled on the floor, staring up at the ceiling, the weight of my decision cascading over me like a heavy blanket. The idea of eventually telling her felt unbearable, yet living with the knowledge that I had kept such a monumental truth from her was gnawing at me, a constant hum in the back of my mind. Days turned into weeks, and I felt the anxiety swell within me like an untamed tide, unsure of how to navigate this emotional sea. I found myself lying awake late into the night, watching as Lila slept beside me, blissfully unaware of my spiraling thoughts. I had made a promise to myself to protect Emma, to give her the happiness she deserved, but was I building her a castle on top of a fragile foundation, one that could crumble with the mere whisper of my truth? Her birthday approached, and with it, my urgency to make a choice. I decided to consult an online forum for advice, a collective of voices that could guide me through my turbulent thoughts. The responses were varied. Some suggested absolute honesty, while others urged caution, reminding me that childhood was a fleeting moment best preserved without complicating truths. The most heartfelt message came from someone who spoke of how being a father isn't defined by blood but by love and dedication, and suddenly, I felt a flicker of clarity. Finally, on a warm evening in late spring, I gathered the courage I had been seeking. I knelt down beside Emma as she played with her toys, her laughter filling the room with warmth. "Sweetie," I began, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands, "can we talk for a moment?" Emma looked up, the excitement in her gaze faltering, sensing the gravity of the moment. I took a deep breath and opened my heart to her, sharing the truth about her parentage in the gentlest way possible, aware that I was walking on thinnest ice. As I spoke, I could see her processing the information, her expression a canvas of emotions, confusion, hurt, curiosity, all washing over her. What struck me was the moment her brow unfurled, replaced by a contemplative gaze. "So, you're still my dad, though, right?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, and in that instant, the anxiety that had been swelling within me began to drain away. I nodded, pulling her into a tight embrace, reassuring her that while the way we had formed our family was different, my love for her had never wavered. In the days that followed, I learned that the bond we shared was resilient enough to withstand the storm of truth. Emma showed an incredible maturity for her age, occasionally asking questions that revealed both a depth of understanding and a deep need for reassurance. I marveled at how she processed this new information, and much to my relief, the love between us blossomed even more. But more importantly, I felt a profound sense of relief myself. The secret no longer loomed like a specter in the corners of our lives, and the soil of our family was enriched with the truth, creating space for even deeper connections. And as I navigated this new phase of our relationship, I realized that honesty didn't shatter the beautiful illusion of our family, it fortified it. I reflected often on how much I had wrestled with that dilemma, and yet, in the end, being honest with her allowed me to see the purity of love that transcends DNA. Update: several months later, as I glanced through my phone one evening, I came across an old message from the forum where I had sought advice. Surprisingly, I discovered replies to my post, people from all corners of the world sharing their own tales of blended families and truths. It was then I realized our story wasn't unique at all, so many had tread this path before me and emerged not just intact but bonded. The comforting notion washed over me that family is often forged not merely by blood but through the shared experiences, love, and resilience that we cultivate together. I leaned back into the cozy embrace of the moment, knowing that, come what may, my daughter would never question whether she belonged. She was my light, and I was her dad, forever intertwined in a tapestry of love and understanding. As I gazed at the flickering candlelight, casting comforting shadows around the room, the weight of the secret I had carried for so long began to feel both heavier and lighter at the same time. While I had crafted a life full of laughter, adventure, and love with my daughter, Amy, the thread of truth tugged at my heart. The day I received the news about my partner's unexpected pregnancy and the true nature of our relationship was one of those moments that forever redefined my perspective on family. I was not biologically linked to Amy, a fact that often lingered at the back of my mind like a faint whisper, reminding me that I was an outsider to a world I had willingly entered. Yet, as the years passed, it became increasingly clear that blood did not define my role. The myriad of bedtime stories, scraped-knee band-aids, and heartfelt conversations about her day did. Resigned to the notion that revealing this truth could shatter the innocence of our bubble, I made the choice to keep my silence, to protect her joy and the sanctuary we had built together. But as she grew more curious about her origins, her questions began to feel like gentle nudges toward a truth I couldn't continue to evade forever. They were innocent at first, simple inquiries about her features and why she looked different from me, questions that caught me off guard and sent a shiver of unease down my spine. I watched her brilliant smile fade to that of uncertainty as she probed further into her identity, and each question felt like a pressure cooker building inside my chest. I could feel the responsibility of my role as her father shift under that weight, and I was torn between my urge to cuddle her close in reassurance and the gnawing doubt of whether my silence was truly in her best interest. One evening, after reading her a story about a little girl who was brave enough to embrace her roots, Amy turned to me, her big brown eyes glistening with curiosity. "Daddy, what if we all have something special about us? What if I'm not like you?" The question caught in my throat, and I found myself caught off guard. It was as if the very universe conspired to push this secret to the forefront of our lives. Unbeknownst to me, she had been contemplating the same questions that had clouded my mind. My heart raced, realizing that the moment of truth was approaching, and I had to find a way to navigate this delicate discussion. Drawing a deep breath, I sat down with her, and in that serene space between us, I carefully crafted my Words, remembering how important it was to share the love we had built over the years. Amy, I started slowly, you were brought into this world in the most special way, and no matter how you came to be in our family, you will always be my daughter. The way she tilted her head in slight confusion tugged at my heart. I knew I had to explain further. With each passing moment, I unraveled the layers of my past, speaking of her biological father with kindness and care, making sure she understood that a father's love is not defined merely by genetics but by actions, choices, and unwavering dedication. It was delicate, like weaving a fragile tapestry of understanding, and as I watched the pieces of her understanding shift and settle, I felt both relief and anxiety in equal measure. Her brow furrowed in contemplation, and for a moment, I held my breath, fearing what might come next. Would she feel betrayed? Alone? But as that moment stretched, the dawning recognition washed over her features, a softening in her expression, as if she had been let in on a beautiful secret. So, my real dad is out there? She asked, a bit of wonder coloring her tone. I nodded gently. He is there, but it's the love I have for you every day that makes me your dad, too. It might have been a small part of our journey, but as she absorbed it all, I saw the shadows in her eyes lift as understanding graced her features. She wrapped her arms tightly around me, and in that embrace, I felt the burden lift, realizing that honesty had brought us even closer. A few weeks later, I found us sharing ice cream on a warm summer evening, laughter spilling into the air like confetti. Amid playful bites of rainbow sprinkles, Amy suddenly said with a thoughtful pout, "You know what, Daddy? It doesn't matter where I come from. I have you, and that's all that matters." My heart swelled with warmth, a familiar comfort wrapping around me as I leaned in to kiss her forehead. With her candid heart and fierce spirit, she had shown me that love truly transcends all obstacles. As we sat, watching the sun dip below the horizon in a blaze of fiery colors, I felt grateful for that moment, blessed to walk this path with her by my side, knowing we would continue to weave our experiences into a beautiful tapestry for years to come. Each day would bring its challenges, perhaps even more questions about who she was and where she came from, but I realized now that we would face them together, hand in hand, and with an eye for the love we cultivated over a lifetime. Family was not defined solely by heritage, it was the dance of trust and understanding we shared, the bridge of love spanning the depths of our differences, creating an unbreakable bond stronger than any DNA. With that notion held firmly in my heart, I returned to the present moment, feeling the warmth of our journey flow through me, shaping our narrative as something beautiful, something we could cherish forever. In that serene moment, I could almost hear the whispers of our future echoing in the soft, cozy corner of the living room where we often spent our evenings together. The flickering light from the fireplace cast gentle shadows against the walls, and I smiled as I watched my daughter, Lily, sprawled out on the floor with her vibrant coloring book, her brow furrowed in concentration as she selected the perfect shade of blue for the ocean she was creating. There was something enchanting about the way her imagination flowed free, the carefree nature of childhood radiating from her every brushstroke. As I caught a glimpse of her focused determination, I couldn't help but marvel at how far we had come since those tentative days after her mother and I had decided to marry. Admitting the truth about my relationship to Lily felt daunting, even now. The fear of shattering the world she thought she knew, filled with unconditional love and security, lingered in the back of my mind like a shadow I couldn't shake off. But looking at her, my heart swelled with a sense of duty. I wanted her to feel the freedom to embrace her whole story, even with the complexity that it carried. It wasn't just about what she thought her origins were, it was about empowering her to see that who she was a beautiful mosaic of experiences, love, and tender moments shared with those who cared about her deeply. Days turned into weeks, and life continued to unravel its ordinary and extraordinary moments. We shared laughter over pancake breakfasts, cozy movie nights where we huddled under blankets, and simple days filled with the sweet aroma of grass and sunshine as we explored local parks. Yet in those delightful everyday encounters, the unspoken truth loomed like a soft veil, reminding me of the delicate balance between the worlds we inhabited, the one of fairy tales and the one of reality. Each evening, as we tucked ourselves into bed, I found myself weighing the power of honesty against the comfort of fiction. Could the truth truly coexist with her innocent understanding of life? I never wanted to be the one to fracture the lens through which she viewed her little universe. As I watched her drift off to sleep, curled up with her favorite plush toy, all I could think was how much I wanted to shield her from any possible hurt. Then came the day that shifted everything. I was sitting at the kitchen table, absent-mindedly scrolling through my phone while waiting for Lily to return from school, when an email from her teacher flashed on screen. At first, I felt my heart race in alarm as I read the subject line, Family tree project. Lily had mentioned it a few days prior, her eyes sparkling with the excitement of creativity and knowledge, but all at once, a knot formed in my stomach. The assignment asked the children to bring in a family tree detailing their lineage, including pictures and stories about their ancestry. For a quick second, I considered reaching out to the teacher, confessing my circumstances, but the thought of drawing even more attention to our non-traditional family sent my anxiety skyrocketing. If this was a test of her knowledge of who she belonged to, would Lily's heart break realizing I wasn't who she thought I was? When she bounded through the door later that afternoon, I held my breath, forcing an encouraging smile. "Hey, sweetheart. How was school today?" I asked, knowing I was stepping into the unknown. Her face lit with delight at the mention of her project as she began recounting each detail, her enthusiasm contagious. The colors, the stickers, the stories she'd heard about her grandparents, it all poured from her lips like a warm stream. It was during those moments that I felt the weight of my secret pressing down on me, filling me with a mix of admiration and unease. As she unfolded her plans for the family tree, it dawned upon me that I would have to navigate this delicate situation with grace and thoughtfulness. As we sat together, Lily busily cutting out images to represent the various family members she would include, I found my heart racing. I knew I couldn't put off the inevitable much longer. But as I watched her sigh after completing her art project, a soft smile gracing her face, I realized she was so incredibly proud of what she was creating. Instead of rushing toward that uncomfortable confrontation, I felt compelled to help her frame the narrative. "You know, Lily," I began gently, "family can be made up of many different branches and roots. Although some families look like a super elaborate tree, others might be more like a patchwork quilt of love." She looked up at me with her big, curious eyes, prompting me to continue. "What if we made this tree reflect all the people in your life who matter, those who love you just the way you are? It could be really special to include me, your mom, your grandparents, and anyone else you adore." As she pondered my words, a flicker of realization seemed to dance in her gaze, her creativity evidently igniting a deeper understanding of what family truly means. "Can I put stickers for my favorite friends?" she asked brightly, and I couldn't help but chuckle, a wave of relief washing over me as I saw her spirit flourish. It felt like a small victory, perhaps this was my child's first step toward embracing a broader definition of family. Embracing that ambiguity would give her strength and resilience in navigating this winding path. By the time the project was finished, I realized that I, too, had begun to rewrite my own story. As she proudly displayed the completed family tree artwork on the fridge, a beautiful representation of our unconventional yet profound connection, I felt the weight of my fear slowly evaporate, replaced with warmth and positivity. Our past would forever remain part of us, but love was the true anchor for our future. And as I tucked her into bed that night, I whispered the words I had nearly forgotten to say. "You are my heart, Lily. Always." In her sleepy eyes, I finally saw the reflection of trust. The weight of my challenge hadn't vanished, but I sensed the worry for the future, if only momentarily, felt lighter as I closed the door, heart full with a deep hope. Now, it seemed our intertwined tapestry would only continue to grow richer and more beautiful in the moments that followed. It started like any other weekend in my cozy apartment, sunlight streaming in through the living room window, casting soft shadows on the walls adorned with my paintings. I'd spent most of the week in my studio, experimenting with colors and textures, lost in a world of creativity that often felt like my only refuge. Art had always been my passion, and with each brushstroke, I poured my heart into every canvas, treating each piece as a personal expression of my inner landscape. My boyfriend, Henry, often remarked how he admired my talent, but I could tell there was a part of him that didn't quite understand the depths of my connection to my work. Whenever he'd come over, he'd inevitably reach for my brush or try his hand at mixing paints, thinking this would draw us closer. I appreciated his enthusiasm, but it often felt like an intrusion. One Saturday afternoon, I was preparing to start a new canvas, envisioning a vibrant sunset that fused fiery oranges with deep purples. It was the kind of piece I desperately wanted to share with the world. As I organized my paints, Henry strolled in with a new set of acrylics he'd picked up from a nearby store. "I thought we could have some fun today," he said, his eyes bright with excitement. I felt a pang of annoyance, but instead of voicing it, I smiled and suggested we hang out first, letting him have the run of my living room with his beginner's brushes. He agreed, and we spent a while chatting, munching on snacks, and throwing paint at some scrapboards I didn't mind getting ruined. But then things took a turn. After seeing me work, Henry casually, almost haphazardly, grabbed one of my larger canvases, the one I had set aside for my sunset masterpiece, and started to cover it with a vibrant green blob. My heart sank as I froze, watching him work. No, 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 I whispered more to myself than to him. That's not. You can't just, but before I could articulate my frustration, he stepped back and said, "Look at that. I made something." All I could see was the destruction of my vision, the piece I had been nurturing in my mind for days, reduced to a chaotic mess of colors that didn't belong. Bitterness seeped through my resolve, and I attempted to explain how important that canvas had been to me, but he just shrugged, a smile plastered on his face, completely unaware of my growing agitation. It felt like a betrayal, and at that moment, I couldn't find the words to convey how hurt I was. The day ended on a strained note, and after he left, I hovered over the ruined canvas, tears pooling in my eyes. I didn't even want to look at it anymore, and something inside me snapped. I rolled it up and tossed it into the trash, almost feeling an odd sense of satisfaction as I did so. But relief quickly morphed into guilt. The next day, Henry asked about it, and I could see the excitement in his eyes as he recalled that moment of impromptu collaboration. I hesitated, my throat tightening as I confessed what I had done. Henry's expression turned from amusement to astonishment. "You threw it away? Why would you do that?" I wanted to scream my frustration at him, explain how he'd ruined something precious, but instead, I felt small. "Because it was mine, Henry. And it meant something to me," I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. The silence that enveloped us felt heavier than ever, and he just nodded, looking away. I expected an argument, a confrontation, but instead, we both stood in the fallout of a decision that had felt both impulsive and justified. "You didn't even care about it," he countered quietly, hurt flashing across his features, and in that moment, I realized the different ways we valued art and expression. We didn't see eye to eye, and maybe we never would. That evening, I sat alone in my studio, contemplating my actions. It wasn't just about the canvas. It was about communication, respect for one another's passions, and how quickly love could devolve into misunderstandings. I thought about the work I wanted to do, the emotions that needed to flow, and I knew I had to reach out to Henry, to explain further, to tell him how much his excitement meant but how it clashed with my creative process. As the moonlight spilled through the window, illuminating my untouched canvases, a sense of clarity washed over me. Perhaps that was the lesson in all of this, not just about art but about understanding each other as we tread through our distinct worlds. Our relationship needed open conversations, a commitment to honor each other's spaces. I texted him, asking if we could meet and talk. He replied almost instantly, saying he'd really like that. As I prepared to step into an uncertain but necessary conversation, I was left contemplating whether I was truly the a-hole in this situation, or if we were just two artists in a world that sometimes felt too confined. In the weeks that followed, we learned to navigate our differences, finding a balance between my art and his enthusiasm as we started collaborating on new projects where we could both express our creativity without stepping on one another's toes. The discarded canvas became a reminder of our journey, a testament to the struggles that could end in understanding, and in that rawness, our relationship grew stronger. Sometimes, I still wonder if I should have approached the situation differently, but maybe it was all necessary, a chapter in our story that led to deeper connections, both artistically and emotionally. As I reflect on those days, I find myself smiling at how we transformed our creative chaos into a symphony of collaboration. The discarded canvas, painted with reckless abandon and then marred by unintended destruction, eventually became more than just a victim of frustration. It morphed into a catalyst for growth. It was during one of those late nights, and we sat in our quaint little living room, filled with the smell of brush strokes and oil paint, that I realized how much we had changed. We had taken steps to infuse more understanding into our artistic practices, but more importantly, we were learning to navigate our lives together in a way that felt harmonious rather than combative. I remember the soft glow of our desk lamp casting shadows on the walls, flickering like the moments of doubt and hope that intertwined our stories. I had brought home a few canvases, each one a blank slate, eager to embrace the new chapters we were writing. We decided one evening to create a mural on the large wall in the living room, a combined testament to our growth and a reflection of our journey together. He suggested we blend abstract designs, flowing shapes that could symbolize our individual paths merging into one. The planning was half the fun, brainstorming in the late hours of the night, discussing colors, even arguing playfully about which patterns would complement the other's style. We stood shoulder to shoulder, surrounded by bursting tubes of paint and the remnants of our previous projects, as laughter filled the air with a warmth that made the room feel alive. It was in those moments I felt the cracks of our earlier misunderstandings start to heal, each stroke on our mural reflecting our innate desire to express who we were and what we had fought through, paving a road to understanding. Sure, there were still hiccups along the way, he made a few accidental spills, and I had my share of exasperated sighs, but the atmosphere remained playful and light, filled with the essence of compromise. The mural itself turned out vibrant and chaotic, with swirls of blues and greens colliding but still fitting together in a strange, beautiful way, just like us. Once completed, it became a conversation starter for our friends who came over, a visual representation of our evolution intertwined like threads in a tapestry. Even on days when I felt a shadow of doubt creeping back in, I'd look at that mural, its colors speaking unspeakable truths about our partnership, and a sense of pride would wash over me. Looking back, I see that, while the moment of throwing away the ruined canvas was driven by frustration, it was precisely what we needed to ignite not just a conversation but a whole new dialogue within our evolving relationship. It's intriguing how one little action can spiral into such immense growth, leading to a bond fortified by creativity rather than just love. Sometimes I still wonder about the piece that had been tossed away, what it could have transformed into had we taken a different route. Yet somewhere deep down, I realize that every discarded moment has its purpose, leading us to the vibrant mural on our wall, a tale of understanding that will forever remind us of the beauty found within the chaos of love and art. As the weeks melted into months, I often found myself drawn to that vibrant mural, a collage of colors swirling together in chaotic harmony. It spoke not just of our artistic journey but of our journey as a couple, reflecting every argument and every compromise we had navigated together. Each swirl represented a moment in time, a glimpse into what it meant to truly collaborate and communicate. The eventual blending of our styles created something entirely new, a unique expression that still felt like us but was also something beyond our individual selves. I'd catch myself smiling at it while washing the dishes or during evening chats on the couch, wrapped up in our shared warmth. Sometimes Jimmy would tease me about staring at our masterpiece for too long, claiming I had an obsession. I'd laugh it off, but deep down, I knew he was right. It was a part of our lives now, almost like a guardian watching over our routines. But even as we flourished, I couldn't completely shake off the shadows of that old canvas. There were nights when I would trace the outline of the mural with my fingers, feeling the layers of paint beneath my touch, and I'd remember that first piece, the potential it held and the frustration it had caused. Did I make the right call? Each time that question flitted through my mind, Jimmy would always sense my distractions. "You okay?" he'd ask, setting down his sketchbook and shifting focus onto me, his brow creased with genuine concern. His kindness washed over me like a warm tide, pulling me back from my musings, and I'd reassure him, reminding myself I had to let go of that weight. We continued to bond through our projects, but with every brushstroke we painted together, I also began to see the cracks in my own patience. I was forgiving of his exuberance, but frustration bubbled beneath the surface when he attempted to take creative liberties on my designs. It started innocently enough, a splash of unexpected color on a planned composition, but before long, he would challenge my intentions, suggesting changes that were more reflective of his style than my own, and I found that familiar tension creeping back in. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting warm orange hues across the room, I stood before our latest piece, a work we had both poured our souls into. Jimmy joyfully suggested one more addition, a bright green streak across the center, and I felt a strange pang in my chest, a warning against complacency. "Maybe we should leave it as is," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but the smile slowly faded from his face. "Why? We could make it even better. We've come this far together," he countered, enthusiasm undeterred, his eyes widening with excitement. But as he painted the bold green, I stared at the disruption, feeling my heart race, bracing against what felt like an impending clash. Memories of the ruined canvas rushed back, and rather than feeling the joy of creation, I was suffocated by the fear of losing my artistic integrity again. "It feels wrong, Jimmy," I finally croaked, forcing the words through a tightening throat. His brush froze mid-stroke, and in that silence, I could almost hear the echo of every previous misunderstanding bouncing off the walls. "What do you mean wrong? I thought we were in this together." The hurt in his voice sent a shiver through me, every word punctuated with raw emotion. I hesitated, feeling the weight of my dilemma. I could either fight for my vision or consider his perspective, pondering the fragile state of our connection. In that moment, I closed my eyes and chose vulnerability. "I'm scared, okay? I mean, look at what happened last time. I don't want to lose control like that again." The walls around my heart began to crumble, and as I opened my eyes, I found him staring back at me, the light reflecting concern on his face. "I get that," he said softly, taking a step back, "but it's not about losing control. This is collaboration, and collaboration means trust. I trust your judgment, and you have to trust mine too." Looking at him, I couldn't help but wonder how this relationship had transformed, how personal this bond had become, an intimate dance between passion and compromise. It was true, I had to let go of the past. I slowly lowered my guard, and instead of shutting him down, I proposed an idea that felt both risky and liberating. What if we painted some smaller pieces together, just as a way to test our balance? If we don't like something, we can always paint over it or let it go. He blinked at me, surprised, and a slow smile crept along his face. "I like that. A fresh start, right?" And just like that, a new dialogue brewed between us. We committed to smaller projects, immersing ourselves in trial and error rather than tangible expectations, opening ourselves to failures but celebrating the little moments of creation. As we painted, the air around us thickened with laughter, music, and a newfound understanding. The mural became a backdrop for our evolving friendship, and each smaller piece that emerged without the weight of overthinking became a splash of relief amidst our artistic memories. A couple of weeks later, as we stood before a series of colorful canvases strewn across the floor, I felt a warmth flood through me upon realizing how far we had come. The shadows of doubt hadn't vanished, but they danced around the newfound light we were cultivating. I knew this journey would continue to challenge us in unexpected ways, but with every stroke, we embraced the beautiful chaos. Even as I glanced back at the mural, I smiled at our past as much as our present. Together, we were crafting art amid the uncertainties of life and love, learning not just to cope with the unknown, but to celebrate it, a vibrant tapestry of joy and growth. And with that reflection warm in my heart, I felt hopeful about what lay ahead, both creatively and relationally. We had found a rhythm woven not just through our art but through our trust, our patience, and our growing love, inching us toward vibrant futures together. It was a crisp autumn evening when I found myself seated on a park bench, the sun dipping low and casting golden hues over the trees, lost in thought as I waited for my friend Sarah. We had grown up together, our lives entwined in a winding road of shared memories, laughter, and even occasional disagreements. One of those disagreements surfaced less than a week ago when Sarah casually mentioned she had rehomed her cat, Luna, because she was moving into a new apartment that didn't allow pets. I remember how my stomach churned at those words, the implications weighing heavy as I fought against the instinct to defend the word or home, a term that felt cold and clinical in this context. To me, it signified a relinquishment of responsibility, a decision that felt too easy for someone who had adored their pet just weeks before. When she arrived, enthusiasm radiated from her as she spoke about her new place, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I had to say something. "Did you really have to rehome her?" I asked, my voice teetering between concern and accusation. Sarah's smile faltered, her eyes flicked away, a flicker of guilt dancing on her features. "Well, I didn't have a choice," she replied defensively, her fingers tracing the fabric of her jacket. It felt like an innocent conversation spiraling into something deeper, an unspoken battle of values. As she continued detailing the space in her new apartment, excitement spilling from her like the leaves falling around us, I wrestled with the weight of my words. Was I being harsh? Was it fair to confront her at that moment, when all she wanted was to share her joy? I could see Luna's big, curious eyes, the way she would curl up in my lap when I visited Sarah, and it just felt wrong. "You could have found someone who could take care of her properly," I said, my voice steadier now, watching for Sarah's response. There was a long silence. Her expression closed off, and for the first time, I felt the distance between us. "You don't get it, do you?" she finally said, a hint of anger creeping into her tone. "I loved her, but I couldn't keep her. I had to think about my life. You know how it is when you're on your own." That was it. My heartbeat pulsed loud in my ears as I processed her admission, my mind rushing through memories of late-night snack raids indulging in comfort food, the unshakable bond that had once brought us close. I was the anchor, and she had seemed so adrift. I wanted the best for her, but at that moment, I felt like I had done the unthinkable. We were friends, yet I had challenged a decision that cut deeper than I realized. After that evening, our communications chilled. She began to post pictures of her new apartment, filled with stylish decor and vibrant colors, each post a reminder of how our lives were heading in different directions. I longed to reach out, to mend the bridge I had burned with my misplaced need to correct. A few weeks later, I decided to invite her over. For coffee. As I poured and we settled into the familiar comfort of my living room, I took a leap. I'm sorry for how I reacted. It wasn't my place to judge your decisions. I was scared of losing our friendship, she sighed, her defenses lowering. I didn't mean to shut you out. It just hurt to hear it from you. There was a catharsis in admitting our faults, a moment where we synchronized our emotions, realizing the importance of honesty. As we talked it through, we both learned the value of understanding versus judgment. Maybe I wasn't the asshole, but just a friend trying to navigate a complex emotional landscape. I remember leaving the conversation feeling lighter, wrapped in a new layer of connection with Sarah, imperfect yet honest. In our journey to find common ground, we had stitched together a stronger bond, one that could withstand the challenges of life, including the heartbreak of saying goodbye to a pet. And as autumn slipped into winter, I reflected on how it was all right to feel deeply, to weigh decisions heavily, even when it caused ripples in our relationships. It's not about being right or wrong. Sometimes, it's simply about learning to listen. Update: a few months later, Sarah reached out, asking if I could join her for a fundraiser at the local animal shelter. Passion gleamed in her eyes as she spoke about the importance of responsible pet ownership and the struggles of animals in need. I think it's time I helped make a difference in some way, she said. In that moment, I knew Sarah had turned her experience into motivation, reshaping her heartache into advocacy. As we teamed up to raise awareness together, that initial tension, that moment of conflict, became a stepping stone into something greater, a testament to the resilience of friendship wrapped in understanding and growth. We started planning the fundraiser with a sense of purpose that I hadn't expected. As the days passed, I found myself leaning into this project with all the energy I had, eager to support Sarah in her newfound mission. The community pulled together in a way that was almost magical. Local businesses donated food, prizes, and even some services for the event. It was amazing to see people rally around something so meaningful. The shelter, a small yet bustling space filled with the soulful mews and barks of its inhabitants, became a second home to both Sarah and me. We spent hours making flyers, organizing online donations, and promoting the event on social media. With each post and share, I noticed Sarah's spirits rising significantly. She had transformed from a person who felt the heaviness of her previous decision into a beacon of light for others who were struggling with similar choices. The night before the fundraiser, we sat on the floor of my living room, strewn with papers, colorful decorations, and half-empty takeout containers. The air was alive with excitement, and I couldn't shake the feeling of how much this experience had brought us closer. As we laughed and shared stories about the cats we both cherished and the oddities we had come across at the shelter, I felt a sense of peace settle over us. The weight of that initial argument slowly faded, replaced by shared laughter and dreams of making a real difference. We had both learned from the experience. I was grateful for the way she had opened up about her choices, and she was hopeful about helping others avoid similar pitfalls. The day of the fundraiser dawned bright and sunny, a perfect backdrop for our event. People arrived with smiles, families brought their children, and a few furry friends bounced alongside them. I could see Sarah in her element as she mingled with the crowd, reading to the kids gathered around her, while I handled the donations and set up a photo booth for some adorable pet portraits. We had even arranged for a local animal trainer to give demonstrations. The allure of seeing cute animals working alongside humans drew in a larger crowd than we could have anticipated. I kept glancing at Sarah throughout, marveling at how far she'd come since that difficult conversation. Around mid-afternoon, as we watched people bidding on hours with the dog trainer, I noticed Sarah standing by herself a short distance away, a frown creasing her brow. I approached cautiously. "Hey, you good?" I asked, concerned. I had just seen her shine moments before. She looked up at me, her eyes a mixture of uncertainty and frustration. "I guess I never really thought about how much my choice affected others," she admitted quietly. "I mean, look at all these people. They're here to support a cause. Meanwhile, I felt like I'd let my cat down." Her voice trembled slightly, and I felt a surge of compassion wash over me. It was a moment of raw vulnerability, and I understood that her past choices still haunted her despite her efforts to turn things around. The crowd buzzed in the background, but the world felt still between us. "Sarah," I said softly, "what you did wasn't ideal, but it was part of your journey, and now you're using that to make a difference." I took a moment to gather my thoughts before continuing. "Every person here has made mistakes in one way or another. Your honesty about what happened with your cat has inspired others to take responsibility. You're helping people understand that rehoming doesn't equal giving up. It can be a tough decision with a new beginning waiting on the other side." Her expression shifted slightly as she absorbed my words. You really think so? She asked, a hint of hope flickering in her eyes. I nodded, reassuring her with a smile. I really do. And look around us. You're creating a community of awareness and compassion. That's bigger than just one bad decision. It was as if a dam inside her had broken, releasing the tension she'd held onto for so long, and she smiled, a genuine spark lighting up her features. As the day unfolded, I watched Sarah as she engaged with attendees, sharing stories, and embracing newfound friendships with those passionate about animal welfare. It filled me with warmth to witness her come alive in this atmosphere, where her past hadn't defined her, and her desire to advocate for animals took precedence. We did well that day beyond our expectations. We raised more funds than we could have hoped for and brought awareness to animal welfare like never before. As the sun began to set, and people started to gather their things, Sarah and I took a moment to reflect. We really did it, she sighed, exhaustion lining her voice, but joy danced in her eyes. I felt a wave of pride swell within me as I nodded, the remnants of our earlier disagreement wholly eclipsed by this sense of achievement and camaraderie. It would take time for Sarah to completely forgive herself, and while we both knew the road ahead wouldn't be without its challenges, I was glad she had found purpose again. In the weeks following the event, we continued to volunteer at the shelter, slowly helping build a network of support and fostering hope in our community. I began to realize that even the most painful mistakes could pave the way for healing and understanding. They might be rough avenues, but they often lead us to where we are truly meant to be. With every adoption story we shared, every happy ending we witnessed, I felt grateful to be by Sarah's side, an unexpected partner in this journey towards redemption. Eventually, one evening after a long shift at the shelter, Sarah and I found ourselves just sitting in the quiet, the hum of the night wrapping around us like a comforting blanket. I think I'm finally at peace with what happened, she whispered, her voice calm and assured. And it's because of you. I smiled softly, feeling that once tense chapter of our friendship close like a book meeting its last page, knowing well that every ending sparks the light of a new beginning. The lessons embedded within lay the foundation for exploring our own journeys with newfound empathy and strength. As the stars flickered overhead, I marveled at how far we had come together. Gone were the days of tense discussions and misunderstandings, replaced by an unspoken bond forged in shared experiences and common goals. The shelter had become more than just a workplace, it was our sanctuary, a place where laughter spilled over the cages of cats and dogs alike, mingling with the sweet smell of pet food and the warm glow of the overhead lights. Evenings spent sorting donations turned into brainstorming sessions for future campaigns, and I could see the spark of determination in Sarah's eyes, illuminating her path forward. You know, I said after a gentle pause, if we keep this up, I think we'll make quite an impact. She chuckled softly, her laugh a melody that drove away the night's chill. The chilly breeze that wafted through the open window felt lovely, a reminder of the world outside but inside. It felt like we had created our own safe haven, dedicated to ensuring others would find solace just as we had. One day, while wolfing down pizza in the break room, we started discussing the idea of an awareness poster for the fundraiser, describing responsible pet adoption in vivid detail. She suggested we feature personal stories from people who adopted pets from the shelter. I thought it was brilliant and couldn't help but share my own experience, how I had adopted my cat, Luna, who had been found roaming the streets, frightened and alone. The pure joy on her face as she listened reminded me how storytelling could bridge gaps, fostering connection and understanding amongst us. Every new idea swirled in the air like the sweet aroma of the pepperoni pie resting between us. The potential felt palpable. It dawned on me, as laughter echoed off the walls, that these projects were transforming both Sarah and me, aiding us in our journeys of growth, hers from overcoming loss, and mine from learning to advocate fiercely for those who couldn't speak for themselves. As the day of the fundraiser approached, an air of excitement hung around us, and so did the nervous anticipation. We prepared for an influx of community members at the shelter, hoping to raise funds and awareness. With the event looming closer, however, the reality of putting ourselves out there made my stomach flutter. What if I stumbled over my words? What if no one showed up? Every worry was a small cloud in the bright sky of possibility, and Sarah seemed to sense my anxiety, offering reassuring smiles and gentle pats on the back as we honed our message. We're just sharing our love for animals, she'd remind me, her strength palpable as she navigated her own hesitations. Her calm radiance became my anchor, and slowly, I realized that our paths intertwined not just in friendship but in the mission we shared. On the day of the fundraiser, the shelter vibrated with life and energy, various booths filled with animals looking for homes, volunteers bustling, and the intimate chatter of community filled the air. As people poured into the building, I felt a swell of pride. We had worked hard for this moment, igniting conversations about responsible pet care and the responsibilities that came with adopting. I was surprised when Sarah took her place behind the mic, addressing the crowd with vulnerability and strength. She spoke of the harsh realities within the world of animal welfare, but her voice trembled with passion and love, speaking about how significant it was to choose patience over impulse when it came to rehoming pets. It struck me then, witnessing the audience captivated by her story, that our paths were not merely parallel but actually woven together in a tapestry of understanding, compassion, and collective effort. Later that evening, as the last of the guests trickled out and the leftover pizza grew cold on the table, we took a moment to revel in our success, counting the donations and smiling at the progress we made. I used to feel so lost, you know? Sarah admitted, her brows furrowed slightly. But talking about my experience, sharing it with others, it's like a weight lifted. I nodded, knowing exactly what she meant. In that moment, something inside me shifted. I realized that this journey had not only been about healing for her but also a restorative experience for me too. Having pushed my insecurities aside to advocate for animals had carved out a stronger version of myself, one unafraid to speak up for what mattered. Eventually, as we started to clean up, I could feel the warmth of possibilities ahead. Perhaps it was more than just a fundraiser, it had become a heartfelt rallying call for the community on behalf of those animals still waiting for their forever homes. Months later, Sarah and I would still reminisce about that day, but more importantly, we continued to press on, reaching toward other endeavors that would help better our connection to animals in need. As we expanded our projects, I often thought of that original conflict, a simple miscommunication that had evolved into something profoundly transformative. A reminder that with understanding and time, even the deepest wounds could become a wellspring of strength and new beginnings, each day unfolding a little more like a gentle unfurling of a leaf in spring. It wasn't until a chilly autumn day months later when Sarah called with a breathless excitement. "You need to come over. There's someone here who needs a friend." Curious and slightly amused, I hurried over, only to find her nursing another stray she had taken in, a timid kitten with soulful eyes peering up at me. In that moment, surrounded by warmth and laughter, I knew that although there would always be challenges ahead, Sarah and I had learned how to navigate our way through life's twists and turns, one heartfelt story at a time. And perhaps, from one rehomed cat to another, we had both discovered that every end could lead to a new beginning, forging deeper connections in the heart of it all. I never imagined I would be caught in a struggle between my boyfriend and my father, but sometimes life throws you into the most unexpected conflicts. Growing up, my dad was my rock, the kind of guy who taught me how to ride a bike on a rickety old road, always standing close enough that I felt his presence but far enough that I had to find my balance. He expected nothing less than the best from me, and after my parents' divorce when I was 12, he stepped up to play both roles, becoming fiercely protective of me. I fell in love with Caleb during my sophomore year of college. He had this effortless way of making me laugh, and I felt alive in ways I couldn't explain. Our differences were palpable. While I strived for perfection, my dad's influence still loomed large. Caleb thrived in a world of creativity and spontaneity, often nudging me to break free from my carefully crafted plans. Our relationship flourished, but there was always this looming question in my mind: would my dad approve of him? Things took a sour turn when my family invited me to dinner, a rare event since our schedules rarely aligned. I was excited to introduce Caleb to my dad, hoping they'd hit it off and I'd finally have some peace of mind regarding my father's opinions on my choices. The evening started pleasantly enough, but as the conversation turned, I felt the tension in the air when the topic of Caleb's career in graphic design came up. My father, who had always prioritized traditional paths, openly criticized Caleb's work, dismissing it as a hobby rather than a viable career. I could feel my heart race as Caleb sat there, visibly uncomfortable, trying to maintain his composure while my father launched into a monologue about the virtues of financial security and a stable job. I had been quiet, biting my tongue, but suddenly, I felt this surge of protectiveness swell within me. "Dad, that's unfair," I finally said. "Caleb works hard for what he does. Being a creative doesn't mean he isn't ambitious." The moment my words left my mouth, the room went eerily silent. I held my breath, anticipating my father's reaction as the tension seemed to cling to the walls. He frowned, his disappointment palpable. "You shouldn't be defending him, Ava. You need to look out for yourself, not this boy who can't even provide stability." I felt a flash of anger stir up my insides, blurring that well-practiced boundary of respect I usually maintained. "I'm not defending him, Dad, I'm defending what I believe in." He's passionate and talented, and honestly, I think you're missing the bigger picture. Caleb shot me a grateful glance, but I could tell the weight of scrutiny had doubled. The conversation spiraled. My dad chastised me for placing my love life above my future, and I accused him of living in a box built by his own rigid beliefs. It was an unusual role reversal. My voice seemed to overpower his, yet in the pit of my stomach lingered this heavy sense of dread. Was I being unreasonable? As emotions continued to clash, I realized I felt torn. Here was my dad, who had sacrificed so much for me, and on the other hand, Caleb, who had become my world in such a short time. I saw how frustrated Caleb was becoming and how my dad's words seemed to chip away at his self-esteem, even if he tried to hide it with that charming smile. I think I need to go, Caleb finally said, his tone strained, and it felt like a punch to the gut. I watched as he stood up, the vulnerability in his posture cutting deeper than any argument could. My chest tightened, and I fought the urge to call him back, but instead, I just stood there, caught in this awful limbo of loyalty and love. After he'd left, my father said, "See, Ava? That's exactly what I'm talking about." But his words only fueled my determination. I wasn't going to let this end here. I spent days reflecting on that dinner as I kept in touch with Caleb, our conversations growing sweet and tender through late-night texts. I realized I needed to stand up for our love, to carve my own path rather than allow my father's expectations to influence my decisions. It took a few more awkward dinners and conversations, but slowly, I began to cultivate this new understanding between us. I invited Caleb over for coffee one afternoon, brainstorming ways to maybe patch things up. Eventually, I found the courage to invite my dad to meet with us again, and I explained how important Caleb was to me. I wanted my father to see beyond the surface, to understand the depth of Caleb's character, the kindness, the creativity, the way he believed in me just as fiercely as my dad did. When the day came for us to sit down together, my hands were clammy with nerves. I was shocked to see Caleb and my dad shake hands, both visibly tense. But this time, my voice held steadiness as I guided the conversation, sharing stories about Caleb's projects and aspirations. There were moments of quiet where skepticism hung in the air, but slowly, I watched as my dad's expression shifted, curiosity taking the place of disdain. They even exchanged a few laughs, and by the end of the afternoon, my dad begrudgingly admitted that he underestimated the depth of Caleb's passion. I could feel a weight lift off my shoulders, a tentative bridge being built between the two most important men in my life. Looking back now, I can't help but reflect on those swirling emotions and the daunting task of reconciling family expectations with love. My father's approval is still something I hold dear, and while Caleb and I still face challenges regarding our paths, we've grown stronger for it. I can wholeheartedly say that standing up for what I believe in was the right choice. Sometimes, love needs defense, especially when it's challenged by those who care about us most. Update: after that dinner, things have genuinely improved. My dad even asked to see some of Caleb's artwork, and I caught him smiling at a few pieces. It's still a work in progress, but I feel like we're finally striking a balance. Caleb has a small exhibition coming up, and my dad is planning to attend. Who knows, maybe they'll bond over creativity after all. I'm ready for whatever comes next, holding love and family close. It's been a few weeks since that dinner where tensions ran high but ultimately led to some breakthroughs. I've been thinking a lot about how love isn't just a feeling but a series of choices we make, sometimes in the face of opposition. My relationship with Caleb feels more solid than ever now. Each evening, after long days spent at work, we'd return to my cozy little apartment filled with the scent of his latest cooking experiments, usually something vibrant and aromatic. I would sit at the kitchen island, watching him chop vegetables with deft hands while sharing stories about our day, the comfort of his presence melting away the stresses of the outside world. He often joked about his own art, claiming that cooking was just another form of creativity, albeit with delicious results. The laughter that bounced off the walls during these moments felt like little victories, reminders of the bond we were nurturing together. However, the shadow of that family dinner lingered in my mind, especially as I grew excited about the upcoming exhibition. Caleb had poured his heart, his very essence, into his art, and I was both proud and anxious. Would my dad truly come? The thought of my two worlds colliding was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. One afternoon, I was organizing the invites for the exhibition in our shared workspace. I came across a beautiful canvas that Caleb had kept under wraps. It was his latest piece, a vibrant abstract bursting with swirls of color, emotion radiating from every brushstroke. I asked him about it, and he reluctantly revealed that it was inspired by his struggles, his feelings of insecurity, of being a misfit in a world that seemed to favor conventional status quos. As he described his process, I could see the passion in his eyes. A thought crossed my mind: if my dad could see beyond the surface, maybe he could understand Caleb's journey, the vulnerability he infused into every work of art. The day of the exhibition arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. The gallery echoed with the anticipatory energy of art lovers and critics mingling in hushed tones, their gazes swept across the canvas walls. When I finally spotted my dad entering, his expression was inscrutable. Caleb gave him a genuine smile from across the room, his enthusiasm palpable, and I squeezed my hands together, silently urging my dad to let his guard down. As the evening progressed, I caught snippets of conversation. My dad scrutinized the artwork, sharing anecdotes with fellow attendees, and to my relief, I noticed his expression soften when he commented on one of Caleb's pieces. They eventually gravitated toward each other, and before I knew it, Caleb was showcasing his work, sharing not only the artistic techniques but the stories woven into each piece. The highlight of the night was when Caleb revealed that the colorful abstract I had seen earlier represented the complexity of human emotion, the very thing that often isolates us. My heart swelled with pride, and I watched my dad through the crowd as confusion gave way to understanding. He listened intently, a flicker of something like admiration flickering in his eyes. I breathed a sigh of relief, allowing myself to hope that this exhibition wasn't merely a stepping stone for Caleb, it also served as a bridge between my father's skepticism and Caleb's dreams. As the night wore on, I couldn't help but notice the moments of laughter shared between them, two souls who had once clashed but were now stepping cautiously into the light of each other's worlds. After the exhibition, I found the two of them standing slightly apart, discussing art. I felt a surge of warmth, they were laughing, the walls that had divided them starting to crumble. My dad even complimented Caleb, saying he admired his unique approach. Those words settled like a sweet balm over my heart, soothing the worries that had kept me awake at night. As I moved closer, catching snippets of conversation, I realized that my hope wasn't misplaced. They were talking openly, sharing their perspectives, and I felt as if I were witnessing a new chapter unfold before my eyes. Later that night, when Caleb and I lay side by side on our couch, the glow of the city lights filtering through the window, I couldn't contain my excitement. "I think they really connected tonight," I whispered, my voice barely breaking the comfortable silence. He nodded slowly, tracing patterns on my arm as a smile spread across his face. "Your dad has a lot of wisdom. I just hope he sees that my work comes from a place of honesty," I reassured him, my heart racing. "He does, he really does. I felt it, Caleb. Whatever it is, we're making progress." He wrapped me close, and I realized, in that moment, that love isn't just about finding the right person, it's about creating a little sanctuary amidst the chaos of conflicting lives. When we support one another, we create spaces for understanding, transformation, and healing. As I drifted to sleep that night, visions of the exhibition danced in my mind, vignettes of laughter, creativity, and warmth. Perhaps the road ahead still held challenges, but we were ready for them, carrying love and family close to our hearts, ever hopeful for what lay ahead. The day of Caleb's exhibition arrived, and I stood before the mirror, adjusting my hair and replaying the countless scenarios in my mind. Each thought seemed to intertwine like threads in a tapestry, weaving together excitement and apprehension. What if my dad was still skeptical? What if Caleb felt uncomfortable in the spotlight? But as I stepped into the living room, I found myself inexplicably buoyed by the bright morning light streaming through the window, illuminating the tight-knit atmosphere of anticipation that surrounded us. Caleb paced nervously, tiny flecks of paint smudged on his hands, remnants of late-night creativity. He caught my eye and smiled, a mix of vulnerability and pride gracing his features, and I knew this moment mattered more than the fear swirling in my mind. We arrived at the gallery, an eclectic space bursting with vibrant colors and the chatter of other artists and patrons. My heart raced as we walked through the entrance, the walls adorned with Caleb's pieces, each stroke, each color, an echo of his soul. Glancing towards my dad's reserved expression, I noticed a flicker of curiosity beneath his stoic demeanor. It was as if he stepped into an entirely new world where the art spoke louder than words, unearthing emotions that had long often been buried. As the evening unfolded, friends gathered, laughter floated through the air, and more than a handful of warm exchanges transpired, my connection with Caleb growing deeper amidst the shared joy around us. My dad, quietly attentive, lingered near one of Caleb's larger pieces, a brilliant depiction of a stormy ocean met by a delicate sunrise. I could see his brow furrowed slightly, and in that moment, I felt this strange mix of hope and dread. What was he thinking? Caleb approached, his own uncertainty evident, but to my astonishment, my dad struck up a conversation, sparking a dialogue about the inspiration behind the painting. As I hovered nearby, pretending to examine other works while holding my breath, I listened to them exchange thoughts on creation and passion, their faces lighting up with every shared enthusiasm. There was something extraordinary about that moment, watching my worlds collide, like the sun breaking through clouds. I found myself reflecting on how art can bridge gaps, creating shared experiences that foster understanding. It wasn't just the bonds we cherished with those we love, it was also about allowing them to redefine assumptions about who we are and what we're capable of. Hours slipped by in a slow, colorful dance of connection, and as the gallery began to wind down, Caleb offered my dad a framed piece that he hadn't intended to display. It was a small canvas of a sunset casting hues of orange and lavender over a silhouetted shoreline, the waves gently lapping at one another, capturing the serenity of nature, themes of hope and possibility layered within the brushstrokes. "I thought you might appreciate this," Caleb said, his voice steady despite the tension that still lingered in the air. Dad's expression softened as he accepted the gift, his fingers tracing over the edges of the frame, seeming to absorb its significance. It was as if all the barriers that once existed were systematically crumbling right before my eyes. Dad glanced up at Caleb, and for the first time, I caught a glimpse of recognition, a sense of understanding that transcended boundaries. "I'd like to learn more about your work, Caleb," he said, and the words hung in the air like music, sweet and unhurried. After the exhibition, I found myself drawing a breath of relief, my body instinctively relaxing. We drove home in a comfortable silence, Caleb's hand clasped tightly in mine. The possibilities of a reconciled relationship between my dad and the love of my life felt tangible, like the name of a spell whispered in the dark. As days turned into weeks, my dad consistently asked about Caleb's latest projects, engaged in conversations with full-blown enthusiasm, and I witnessed the transformation of two previously disconnected worlds. Our family dinners transitioned from awkward silences to lively discussions, laughter spilling around the table as stories unfolded like delicate origami. Reflecting on the journey, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude wash over me. It was undeniably hard navigating love between family and partners, and yet it seemed we were learning to make room for all that life threw at us. Even simple moments, sharing our thoughts over dinner, visiting the gallery again, or watching the sunset together, redefined our connections in a fresh light. After a month, Caleb humorously dubbed my dad his new art critic. I could only laugh, grateful for the emergence of something so beautiful from what had once felt so threatening. The path ahead remained full of surprises, but we'd walk it hand in hand, a little more resilient with every stride. And every night, as I tucked myself into bed, my heart overflowed, cocooned within the safety of love and the newfound bond of family. This interconnectedness, was more than I had ever hoped for. Each day was a testament to what could be achieved when love was held fiercely amidst life's unexpected challenges, slowly morphing into something rare and profound. The horizons before us now stretched far and wide, yet still, under the painted stars, I felt a sense of peace knowing we were ready to embrace all that lay ahead. I never thought my day would take such a bizarre turn, but then again, life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. It started like any other Saturday. I had decided to treat myself to a day at the local spa, a hidden gem nestled between two bustling streets, known only to locals and those who frequented hot yoga. I felt the weight of the week lifting off my shoulders as I stepped through the glass doors, the scent of lavender and eucalyptus wrapping around me like a warm blanket. After a long week of work and a slight spat with my partner, I craved a little self-love, and nothing screamed indulgence more than a day spent in soothing baths and rejuvenating treatments. When I finally made my way to the changing room, the bright lights flickered slightly, and the mirrors reflected an array of individuals, all preparing to unwind and ultimately transform into their most relaxed selves. I glanced at my watch and realized I had plenty of time before my appointment, so I took a moment to center myself, unhurried by the world outside. As I stood there, draped in my oversized robe, a wave of spontaneity washed over me. Maybe it was the tranquil ambience or perhaps the lingering frustration from the previous week that nudged me toward what I would later refer to as my confident, yet reckless moment. I could hear faint laughter and casual chatter coming from outside the changing room, the sound of people enjoying each other's company, and I suddenly felt the urge to join in on that liberation. With a mischievous smile creeping onto my face, I slowly peeled off the robe, shrugging it off as though it were nothing more than a layer of mundane responsibility. Standing fully naked in front of the grand mirror, I marveled at myself, feeling unburdened. But the moment I turned around and stepped out, my heart raced as I realized the gravity of what I was about to do. The short hallway leading toward the relaxation area was adorned with serene wall art, pieces capturing nature in beautiful, muted tones. But just as I stepped out, I heard laughter that was suddenly interrupted by sharp gasps. I froze. Standing there in my full glory, I felt the cool air wrap around me, prickling my skin and sending a flush of heat to my cheeks. In that instant, embarrassment overwhelmed me, but something deeper held me rooted to the spot, a strange exhilaration laced with vulnerability. I had expected free love in the spa community, but this was a little different. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw 3 women nearby, clad in bright, patterned bikinis and matching smiles that slowly turned into bemused expressions. One was whispering to her friends, her hand covering her mouth in playful disbelief. "Wah," one murmured, barely concealing her laughter. The tension hung thick in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. My pulse quickened. Was I about to become the subject of ridicule? A sudden wave of doubt crashed over me. I debated retreating back into the changing room, cloaking myself in that robe once again to hide from what I assumed would be a brewing storm of judgment. But the realization of what it felt like to be exposed illuminated my mind. Nakedness, in this moment, was oddly liberating. I could either succumb to the laughter and quickly shroud myself in shame, or I could own this impulsive act and confront the crowd with a light heart. With 3 deep breaths, I mustered the courage I usually reserved for bigger battles and nonchalantly strolled past them, my chin slightly raised, pretending this was just another day in my life. I heard whispers of "Is she serious? And is this a prank?" floating behind me, but instead of crumbling, it felt exhilarating. I found a corner with plush lounge chairs and settled into one, soaking up the warmth that radiated throughout the room. The whispers faded as the serene ambience seeped back in. As I reclined, a persistent thought flickered in my mind. Was I the asshole here for setting such a bizarre precedent? Or was this simply a testament to self-acceptance? Hours passed, the sun drifting just out of sight, and I eventually retreated back to the changing room, a soft smile lingering on my lips. As I slipped back into my robe, I overheard one of the women from earlier discussing their visit while I made my way back across the main hall. I couldn't quite catch their words, but snippets like "that was really brave" caught my attention, draping warmth over my prior embarrassment, transforming it into something uplifting. Back in the sanctuary of my robe, I couldn't help but reflect on those moments of unexpected bravery. Perhaps it didn't matter whether I was the asshole or the hero. In that lighthearted chaos, I had reclaimed a sense of freedom I had long forgotten, something deeper than just a physical state. It was an emotional release. Later, I found myself drafting a post titled "Ida for getting fully naked in a public changing room?" on a popular forum. I recounted the entire day, weaving in my feelings and capturing my tiny triumph nestled within an absurd situation. As I hit post, I realized that whichever way the opinions rolled, the narrative of that day would always chase me into the calmer corners of my mind, reminding me that in life, embracing vulnerability is often the truest form of strength. And as I drifted off to sleep that night, a content laugh escaped my lips when I thought how wonderfully bizarre life could be. The next morning, I awoke with a sense of lightness, a mellow nostalgia washing over me as I recalled the previous day's events. I had anticipated a barrage of judgment when I posted my story online, half expecting to be branded a social pariah for my audacious decision to strip down in a public changing room. Instead, I found myself navigating through a cascade of comments ranging from sympathetic to hilariously incredulous. People weren't just concerned about my nakedness, they shared their own stories of embarrassment, vulnerability, and the mighty human spirit that often rallies around moments of mortification. I brewed a cup of tea, the steam curling in the cool morning air, as I read through the comments. A particularly kind response struck me. Someone had remarked, "Being comfortable in your own skin is a rebellion worth celebrating." This notion anchored itself in my mind. It sparked a lingering warmth that encouraged me to shed the lingering anxieties I had faced in the past, self-doubt, the fear of being judged, and the incessant worry about societal norms. With renewed energy, I decided to take a long walk, letting the crisp autumn air fill my lungs. I meandered through the park, where the leaves danced around me in hues of yellow and orange, the sunlight filtering through the branches in a gentle, dappled embrace. I pondered what it meant to be truly comfortable, not just with my body but with my choices, every decision I had made. Each step felt liberating, almost like the last remnants of my previous anxieties were falling away with the leaves surrounding me. I stopped by a small cafe that I loved, the aroma of brewed coffee wafting through the air, intermingling with the sweetness of cinnamon pastries. As I sipped my coffee, I found myself reflecting on the connections I had formed, both online and offline, during this whimsical escapade. I felt that my experience had resonated with others, which tethered us together in a peculiar yet comforting way. Over the next few days, my post garnered even more attention, sparking long threads of laughter, solace, and the gentle reminder that we all share uncomfortable experiences, stretching beyond the boundaries of physical nakedness. I began to see vulnerability as a shared human element, one that spurred empathy and laughter. Friends would message me, recounting their own tales of embarrassment, like the time my friend Jane overshot her runway in a fashion show and fell, or when Adam, who, outside of his exterior of suave confidence, nervously tripped during his first workplace presentation, turning a simple slide into an impromptu comedy show. Each story illuminated a part of our shared human experience, and as I shared some of my own, laughter echoed across our group chats, creating an unspoken bond. These little encounters began to shape a new narrative in my life, where I felt more at ease, more present in each moment. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself less concerned about societal expectations and more focused on engaging with the world as it came. I joined a local yoga class, a decision both alarming and thrilling, pushing my comfort zone further. One evening during class, as I stood in tree pose, balancing precariously on one foot, I caught a fleeting glance of a woman across the room who was visibly struggling to find her balance. And suddenly, with an explosion of compassion, I felt an unspoken connection with her, an understanding that we were both navigating our paths through uncertainty. I smiled at her, and she smiled back, a shared moment of grace in the midst of awkwardness. As that year drew to a close, I looked back at my initial post, the snapshot of a day that seemed so trivial yet transformed into a deep personal journey. Initially, I thought I was merely sharing a funny story to lighten someone's day, but in reality, I had opened up a discussion about vulnerability and acceptance, leading to significant changes in how I viewed myself and others. I learned that my story was not just about a naked moment in a changing room but about the courage to embrace my true self, flaws and all, amidst a world that often felt all too critical. Feeling contemplative one evening, I decided to post an update on the forum, not out of obligation, but as a gentle reminder to those who had reacted to my original story. I wrote about the shifts in my life, how those reactions had inspired a newfound confidence in me and how discovering the beauty and vulnerability granted me profound connections that weave through my daily existence. As I submitted the post, a sense of satisfaction enveloped me. I had turned a single incident of discomfort into a thriving, gentle dialogue about strength and acceptance that echoed beyond my personal bubble. Life continued to be wonderfully bizarre, as it always had been, a twisted tapestry woven with laughter, vulnerability, and an unwavering belief in the power of connection, one story at a time. The following days unfolded lazily, wrapped in the glow of my newfound perspective. I found myself contemplating my previous anxieties, those little thoughts that gnawed at my self-esteem like mice in the attic. My encounters in that public changing room had spiraled into a revelation, guiding me to appreciate my body and my story without the weight of judgment. I began to notice the world around me anew. A woman in a coffee shop laughed heartily with friends while an elderly man danced with his cane to a street musician's tune. Each moment felt pregnant with life, vibrating with stories often left unsaid, and suddenly my heart felt expansive, capable of weaving connections in ways I had never considered. Encouraged by the sentiment brewing inside me, I decided to revisit the gym, the source of that awkward changing room encounter. The scent of eucalyptus wafting through the air as I entered the facility felt oddly comforting. I felt a strange sense of belonging among the machines and weights. Everyone around me was lost in their own rhythm, striving for their goals, emotionally clad as they worked on forms that were poised for twists, triumphs, and sometimes, embarrassing moments. I chuckled to myself, envisioning how I could transform any discomfort into laughter. As I moved towards the changing areas, my stomach fluttered but not with the anxiety I had felt before. Instead, it was more akin to excitement, an anticipatory spark reminding me that uncertainty was merely a precursor to growth. In the changing room, I opted for a middle ground. I wore a bathing suit top with airy shorts rather than resorting to the bold nudity I'd displayed previously. As I slipped off my clothes, I noticed my reflection and paused. There was a freedom in shedding my anxiety like an old skin. I lifted my head a little higher, mockingly posing as if to a mirror audience, smirking at the absurdity of it all. The building's soft hum filled the space as I stepped out to face the world once again. To my surprise, I was soon greeted by warmer smiles, including a nod of recognition from a fellow gym goer I had shared glances with in the past. Later, I basked in the pool, savoring every ripple and splash, feeling liberated by the sunlight dancing off the water's surface. Laughter echoed around me, a melodious reminder of a world that thrived on connection. I chatted with a few other swimmers, exchanging snippets of life stories, casual and straightforward, but it felt meaningful. It was that unassuming atmosphere of energy that bound us together, all of us in our own respective journeys. After what felt like hours in the sun and splashes, I returned home and opened my laptop, eager to check the reactions to my Reddit post. The responses were a vibrant tapestry of empathy, humor, and shared experiences. People opened up about their own vulnerable moments, their ridiculous mishaps, moments of embarrassment, and those flickering instances of undeniable human connection. I felt a profound sense of community enveloping me as I read through each comment. I even chuckled at a few amusing takes, like a user admitting to accidentally wearing mismatched socks for a week straight because they were too scared to ask for help. As I pondered whether I should share more of my own stories, I reflected on how small moments could birth camaraderie. So, I decided to embark on a new journey, crafting tales of awkwardness and vulnerability, blending them into reminiscent essays to share with my newfound community. I felt an invigorating kinship growing, a feeling that perhaps, by exposing our flaws, we help others feel less isolated in their own. That night, as I lay in bed, the quiet hum of the world surrounding me, I felt grateful for the vibrant narrative life presented. I nestled deeper into my covers, casting my mind back to the changing room encounter, relishing in how a single moment of embarrassment had catalyzed a wave of transformation within me. Perhaps my initial question of whether I was the asshole had been answered. It was never about the nakedness itself. In bearing my vulnerabilities, I ultimately found strength, lightened by connection, and I drifted off, smiling at the thought of the everyday absurdities and the beautifully shared experiences yet to come. I almost quit my job today, and it had nothing to do with the relentless paperwork or the beleaguered patients lined up outside the clinic. I'm a nurse practitioner, and my days usually blur together in an endless cycle of exams and prescriptions, but this day felt different, like the calm before a storm. I was looking forward to my afternoon shift, a solid block of time free from the morning rush, just me, the soothing hum of the fluorescent lights, and the comforting scent of antiseptic lingering in the air. That's when Lily walked in. She was around my age, maybe a bit younger, and her vibrant green hair was styled in a chaotic bun that seemed to echo her energy. I'd heard whispers of her around the clinic, the one with the unusual case. For someone who dealt with anxiety and depression, she managed to light up the dreary waiting room with her infectious grin, but it quickly faded when I called her name. There was something haunting lurking in the depths of her eyes, a slight tremor in her hands that didn't match her bright facade. As she settled into the examination room, the atmosphere shifted. I asked the usual questions, how she'd been feeling, any changes in medication, and why she sought help today. Instead of the typical responses, though, she began to tell me about the voices. They were quiet at first, just murmurs that danced at the edge of her hearing. But lately? They'd grown louder, insisting she was being watched by someone rather sinister. My heart sank into my stomach. HIPAA exists for a reason, protecting both patient privacy and our sanity, but as she continued, something tugged on my conscience. She said her family didn't believe her and, much worse, that they had given up on trying to help her. It's as if they'd rather pretend I don't exist at all, she said, her voice trembling. I couldn't fathom the depth of that pain, the isolation. I could see the flicker of desperation in her eyes, the yearning for validation. I tried to reassure her, encouraging her to seek support from professionals who could offer therapy and possibly medication adjustments, but she insisted that wasn't enough. The voices had sharpened their focus, demanding she prove her existence in a way that threatened her well-being. I felt my heart race as her story unfolded, a pit forming deep within me. It was getting harder to maintain my professionalism. I knew I shouldn't share my thoughts, my personal experiences as a fellow human who'd felt unseen at times, but a voice in my mind urged me to try. Sometimes, the pressure of feeling invisible can become unbearable, I admitted, keeping my tone steady. But it's crucial to reach out to those who care for you. She hesitated, her expression riddled with conflicted emotions. But what if I don't matter to anyone? She whispered. For a moment, I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Many people felt that way at some point, including myself. I wanted to reach across the space between us, to take her hand and reassure her that she mattered. But I couldn't, not without breaching that invisible line that kept patients and healthcare providers apart. I took a deep breath, the weight of the conversation settling heavily on my shoulders. As she left the room, I felt a mix of relief and dread. I was haunted by her words, her pain, and the burdens I couldn't ease for her. It felt wrong not to do more, to walk away and let someone so desperate wander alone into the world, especially with her fragile mental state. That night, I couldn't shake the experience, replaying her words over and over. I couldn't help but reflect on the strength of connection that often eludes us in our professional roles. I wondered if I had neglected that part of my oath, to care as a human as well as a practitioner. Maybe it was my own past experiences intertwined with her pain, but when I clocked in the next day, I resolved to change my approach. I wanted to find ways to connect my patients with support systems that made them feel valid, to foster a space where they could share openly. Perhaps I couldn't reach out in the fullest sense, but I could certainly lead them to resources that would prove that they mattered. As I worked on crafting a new referral brochure for mental wellness services within the clinic that day, I felt a sense of purpose pulsating within me. And in a way, through focusing on Lily's needs, I began healing some fragments of my own past. If nothing else, I hoped she would find a voice she could trust, a lifeline to bridge the gaps left by those who'd turned away. Months passed, and every so often, I would see Lily's name on the schedule. Each encounter felt like a new chapter. On one visit, I was pleased to see she looked better, the shadows under her eyes had lifted slightly, replaced by a flicker of hope in her voice. "You were right," she said, smiling as she unfolded the complexities of her therapy sessions and newfound support group. "I found my voice. And it turns out, I do matter." In that moment, a warmth spread through my chest, a confirmation that sometimes the smallest acts of reaching out can ignite a change profound enough to alter lives. Lily didn't have to bear her burdens alone anymore, and neither did I. I realized then that being a caregiver wasn't just about the prescriptions or the examinations. Sometimes, it was about sharing pieces of ourselves to help others stitch together their narratives, reminding them that they are not invisible nor expendable. In sharing our stories, we learn to redefine connections and uplift each other beyond the stigmas that might bind us. As I took in these thoughts, I glanced over at Lily, her apprehensive expression softening as she leaned back in the chair, visibly more at ease. The sterile white walls of my office, which usually echoed with the coldness of clinical detachment, seemed to blossom with warmth. There was something powerful unfolding between us, a shared vulnerability that felt like the roots of a plant intertwining beneath the surface, hidden yet vital. Somehow, this realization shifted something within me as well. I was no longer just a healthcare provider, I was both a listener and a participant in an unfolding human experience. However, the day grew darker as I remembered the nagging fears that had haunted me since I became a therapist. My mind wandered back to the unwritten rules of my profession. The protocols of HIPAA, with their stringent regulations, often loomed in the background like a shadow, reminding me that I must tread carefully lest I lose not only my career but also the trust of my patients. What if I stepped over a line with Lily? What if sharing even the slightest piece of my life led to a breach of confidentiality? I was supposed to be the one providing support, not dragging us both into murky waters where boundaries blurred. The anxiety gnawed at me, threading a mixture of elation and trepidation through my chest. To prevent the encroaching worries from spiraling, I redirected the conversation, asking her about her own experiences. A flicker of hesitation crossed her face before she divulged her first encounters with therapy. As she recounted her journey through various milestones, each wrought with its own struggles and victories, a sense of connection deepened. There was an innate comfort in the way our conversation flowed, a gentle give and take that felt as gratifying as it was cathartic. Every shared word knitted our beings closer together, yet in my quieter moments, the toll of my own thoughts lingered like a muted refrain in the background. As the session drew to a close, we exchanged pleasantries, but I sensed an unspoken bond tethered between us, stronger than the unyielding protocols of my profession. Lily had opened up in ways I never anticipated, allowing me to glimpse glorious vulnerabilities within her that reminded me of my own struggles, overwhelming at times, but profoundly human. I made a silent vow to find a way to navigate this connection without falling prey to my own fears. Perhaps, I thought, I could share selectively, using my own experiences to guide but remaining steadfast on the path of professionalism. In the following days, I immersed myself in my work, the rhythm of routine comforting yet occasionally disquieting. Yet, I couldn't shake the memory of that session with Lily. I found myself replaying our conversation over and over, marveling at how two souls braving their respective storms could find solace in shared vulnerabilities. With each passing moment, my initial fears surrounding that session diminished. I felt a resolve taking root. I wanted to work on my boundaries while still holding space for the humanity both Lily and I had uncovered. Finally, I decided that the best way to navigate this delicate situation was not in isolation but together. During our next session, I broached the topic with Lily, underlining the importance of our boundaries yet sharing that vulnerability had proven transformative for both of us. To my relief, she assured me she felt the same sense of community, the relief of companionship. Together, we forged a pact to be honest about our boundaries while allowing our connections to flourish. The resolution felt simplistic yet significant. It was an unspoken agreement to uphold the integrity of our therapeutic space while celebrating the truth of our shared humanity. With each session that followed, I felt lighter, an odd sense of liberation tethered to my heart. Lily continued to open up in ways that astonished me, and I found myself drawn to her courage, the way she navigated her challenges with such simmering hope. The fear of HIPAA violations dulled in the face of the profound benefits of our connection. It became part of the backdrop of my practice, where I learned to delicately balance my role while still being present, authentic, and, most importantly, human. Reflecting now on that initial trepidation, I feel a newfound appreciation for the journey we've embarked upon, the uncharted waters of vulnerability and the cozy warmth that rises when care meets courage. Amidst the ethical intricacies of my profession, I've found that the essence of caregiving flourishes in honesty, resilience, and shared stories, cementing a beautiful, imperishable bond stretched across what once felt like walls of clinic and distance. After some time, I received a message from Lily. It was brief yet packed with gratitude, a simple, "thank you," expressing how our sessions felt less like a bandage on wounds but rather a seasoned balm for her spirit. I smiled as I read it, my heart lifting again at the thought that we both had navigated this path together, reminding me that sometimes, in the delicate dance of healing, the lines can blur in the most beautiful ways. Life was about bridging gaps, and our bond, though formed in a therapeutic context, had transformed into a cherished connection that I never could have forged alone. And so I realized, in the unpredictable landscape of being a caregiver, it is the humanity we share, the light and shadows, that helps us grow. As I reflected on that turning point between us, I found myself sitting in my small office, a cozy nook piled high with medical textbooks and framed reminders of why I chose this path in the first place. The walls, painted a calming shade of blue, felt more comforting than sterile as they witnessed the evolution of our relationship, a relationship I had once thought was strictly professional now unfolding into something rich and redemptive. I recalled the countless hours I spent with Lily, sifting through her complexities and the layers of stories she carried like old baggage. Each session had been a dance of vulnerability, her heart laid bare against the backdrop of my clinical paperwork and diagnostic goals. I had come to realize that through her own depths of despair, a flicker of resilience shone, and in turn, she was illuminating the way for me, a reminder of the intrinsic connection that binds us all as we navigate our personal labyrinths. But with joy comes uncertainty, and as thrilled as I was to forge this bond, I knew I had to tread carefully. There were boundaries to consider, ethics to uphold, particularly with someone whose path had been riddled with trauma and heartache. I pondered the intricacies of our conversations and wondered how I could continue to support her while avoiding the slippery slope of overreach. Amidst my thoughts, the reality was the challenging nature of navigating a caregiver's role, enhancing lives and offering insights without overstepping that invisible line, one that could easily blur. Soon, our next session arrived, a Wednesday that marked a full month since she had first come to see me. I prepared with mixed emotions, excitement stitched with the shadows of apprehension. As I entered the room, a familiar sight warmed my heart. Lily was already seated, her hands twirling a small silver locket, a talisman of sorts that had clearly become her anchor. "I've been thinking about what you said last time," she began, her voice steady, yet with a softness that carried an underlying vulnerability. "About sharing pieces of ourselves." Her words unfurled like blossoms in spring. Our conversation deepened and broadened in ways that felt profound yet so natural. She spoke of benevolent ghosts from her past, former friends who had fallen away, consumed by their own battles, and how their absence left scars she sometimes could not articulate. I listened intently, leaning forward, as time seemed to slip away like sand through fingers. What followed was a gentle volley of stories, her laughter sparking light moments, while the shadows of sorrow lurked just behind the edges, grounding her narrative. A part of me knew that I had to reveal a bit of my own past, a thread of vulnerability to encourage her narrative to grow. I shared tales of my early days in this field, moments of crippling self-doubt when my idealism collided with the stark realities of human pain. I spoke of patients whose stories had etched themselves into the tapestry of my soul, shaping my resolve and orientation. A fierce yet fragile connection blossomed in that exchange, making our struggles feel lighter, almost woven into each other's fabric of experience in a way that transcended clinical boundaries. As weeks drifted on, I felt us move through those uncharted waters, each session filled with dimensions that I had long ago yearned for in this profession, a partnership of healing in its purest form. I was filled with hope, camaraderie, and yet, a tinge of fear. It was the fear of losing her to the world's cruel indifference or the possibility of outing her vulnerabilities to another who would not understand. The emotional weight was palpable, but we thrived in our candid spaces, lifting each other. Sometimes I found it a bit too exhilarating and overwhelming, yet necessary. Then one day, it happened. Lily mentioned her desire to take a step further, exploring creative outlets to channel her feelings. She spoke of wanting to write a blog, to immortalize her battles and stir others who might feel lost. My heart raced, not out of fear, but sheer exhilaration at the thought of her blossoming beyond the confines of our sessions. Yet, the notion struck a dual chord. What if revealing those thoughts to the world puts you at risk? I hesitated. But she countered with a quiet steeliness that took me aback. It's my story, and I deserve to tell it how I want. And she paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle. It was a moment that whispered volumes, and I felt our roles reverse in that heartbeat. I began to see her not just as a patient in need of care, but as a beacon of strength, reaffirming that healing was a shared journey, bringing us back, full circle, to where we started, the necessity of weaving our lives together into something magnificent. With that revelation, I let go of my fears, recognizing that sometimes a pathway to healing lay in the raw honesty of our experiences. I embarked on encouraging her, offering my support and guidance while she traversed this new creative venture. As she crafted her first post, I felt a rush of gratitude. By helping her navigate the uncharted waters of sharing, I was also embracing my fears and reaffirming my purpose. In that light, I learned and grew right alongside her. And suddenly, the once stern lines of caregiver and patient blurred in the most beautiful, validating way. As days turned to weeks, I watched her transform into a confident storyteller, her words wrapping around other seekers of solace as if crafting a communal blanket in which they could huddle. The small canvas of our original therapeutic room became a vibrant tapestry stitched with lifelike colors reflecting joy and sorrow, laughter and tears. It drew others in, creating bonds of understanding and shared struggles. One day, while uploading her latest blog post, she reached out to me with dazzling excitement. A 2-minute read turned into an avalanche of uplifting responses. It was then that I began to fully grasp the magnitude of our connection. I felt closer to Lily than I had to anyone in a long time, and as the lines of our roles shifted, I found comfort in the dance we had created together. Then, as the seasons changed, so did our meetings. We held space together, celebrated milestones, and cried over setbacks, all part of a story that was still unfolding. Each session became a symphony of shared moments, navigating the unpredictable landscape together, replete with laughter, tears, and the beauty of newfound openness. With each step, I grew more certain in my belief that this journey was reciprocal. We were learners, healers, companions, and in the end, we were simply two souls forging ahead, one day at a time. As I look back on that journey, I remember it as a paradox, a blend of vulnerability wrapped in strength. I thought I would make Lily stronger, but in turn, she helped me reclaim parts of myself that I had buried under the weight of duty and expectation. In embracing her fragility while celebrating her resolve, I became entwined in the very essence of caregiving, a shared spirit where the act of healing became about all of us, far beyond the mere confines of an office. I never once regretted that I hadn't quit. Instead, I found a path not only for her but for myself, and this, I realized, was precisely what I was meant to do. Update: it's been 6 months since I last wrote this account, and I felt compelled to share a final chapter. Lily's blog had taken off. She was invited onto a platform to speak about her experiences, and through it all, her voice, our voice, has become a beacon for others struggling in shadows. Last week, we hosted a community gathering, bringing people together to share their stories face to face in a celebration of resilience. Something magical happened. In seeing the way our paths converged with others, I realized I wasn't just a caregiver, I was a part of something much larger than myself. We weren't alone anymore, and in stepping away from the boundaries I once feared, I learned that being human means opening ourselves up to the tapestry of lives we weave together, brightened by the stories we share. It all started on a rainy Thursday when I found myself staring at my phone, contemplating whether I should answer the call from Jamie. Jamie and I had been best friends since childhood, our lives woven together like the strands of an old tapestry. He was the kind of person who wore his heart on his sleeve, and while I admired him for that, it often led to the kind of emotional labors that I sometimes felt ill-prepared to navigate. The thing is, I owed him $60 from a bet we placed 3 months prior. At the time, it felt like a good idea. He had bet I wouldn't see a specific movie in theaters, a kind of absurd challenge we often entertained to pass the time. I had pulled through and watched it, laughing at how easily I'd won. But life had a funny way of making one's priorities feel scattered, and with each passing month, that small debt lingered in the back of my mind, like a familiar yet annoying itch I couldn't quite reach. As I sat on my couch, the rain beating against the window, I felt an odd sense of dread. Jamie had been talking about his financial struggles lately, how his part-time job didn't cover his rent or his bills, and I could feel the weight of that call pressing against my chest. I hesitated for a moment, finally picking up the phone, but the conversation wasn't what I anticipated. Instead of the usual banter, Jamie launched into a heartfelt rant about how he felt completely overwhelmed by the world. It was like listening to a dam break, all his frustrations flowing out as he told me about the suffocating weight of his responsibilities. As he spoke, I felt my stomach twist into knots. How could I ask him to let go of this trivial debt when he was clearly in pain? "Look, Jamie, I just need to say something," I interrupted hesitantly. "I know I owe you that $60, but with everything going on, can we just let it slide for now?" I could hear the silence on the other end, how the weight of my words sank into the atmosphere, and I could almost picture his brow furrowing in contemplation. Finally, he spoke, and there was a tremor in his voice. "You know, I really need that money, though." My heart sank deeper. I wanted to help him, but the truth was, my own finances weren't exactly stable. It felt selfish to hold on to my money, but asking him for patience felt equally wrong. Days turned into weeks, and our conversation echoed in my mind like a haunting melody. I could see Jamie's disappointment flash across my memory, see the disbelief etched into his features, and the burden of guilt settled firmly on my shoulders. I tried to reach out, perhaps offering to treat him to coffee or something small to remind him that I cared, but our meetings became fewer as he threw himself into extra shifts. Just as I was spiraling into my own feelings of guilt, Jamie reached out once more, but this time, there was an edge to his voice that set me on alert. He wanted to meet up, and with that, I felt a sense of impending doom settle over me. Did he want to discuss the money again, or was there something else brewing beneath the surface? The anxiety was palpable inside me. It was almost a physical thing, weighing heavy on my chest as I approached the cafe we frequented. When I arrived, he was already seated at our usual table, fidgeting with his phone, looking tangled up in thought. I slid into the seat and gave him a small smile, which he returned with a nod that seemed devoid of any real warmth. "I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation," he began, his voice steady but lacking its usual enthusiasm. "That money. It's not just about the money for me. It feels like a lack of respect, like you don't value our friendship." The words hit me like a slap, and I felt my chest constrict with shame. I started to defend myself, but I could hear the raw hurt in his voice, and my mind raced to find the right words that wouldn't sound like empty excuses. "I thought maybe since things were hard for you, we could let it slide." His gaze was piercing, and I could almost see the crumbling pieces of our history floating between us. The conversations we used to have, the laughter we shared, now felt grim and fragile, like the remnants of a dream slipping away. "But it's not just about the money, it's the principle," he pressed, emotion layered in each word. I could sense the anger rising, and a part of me wanted to retreat, but I owed it to both of us to engage. "Jamie, it's not that I don't care or value you. I'm trying to navigate my own life too. What if I'm struggling in my own way, just like you?" The moment hung heavy, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in his armor begin to show. "I didn't realize you felt that way," he admitted, his voice low, the fight momentum suddenly dulled. I could see the realization wash over him, just as much as it flooded me. Perhaps I wasn't the only one struggling with insecurities masked as arrogance. In the days that followed, we both took a step back, breathing in the unease of our friendship and beginning to stitch it back together with more understanding. I did pay him back the $60. I realized that money was only one part of the equation. What mattered more was the open dialogue we finally had, the clarity that settled between us, allowing both our vulnerabilities to emerge. This experience transformed our friendship. It was no longer about the money but about feeling seen and valued. An update in my mind now gleefully whispered to me. I learned that competitions between friends can lead to both friction and an unexpected depth in connection. Looking back, that seemingly trivial debt acted like a guidepost, leading me to confront not just my financial responsibilities, but my emotional ones too. It became a lesson in empathy and respect, a reminder that true friendship treasures open-hearted conversations over mere transactions. And those rainy Thursdays? They aren't so dreary anymore, as they've become reminders of our renewed bond, strengthened through vulnerability, reminding me every day that sometimes, it's worth diving deeper to find the light. As I settled into my routine, the mundanity of each rainy Thursday transformed into a ritual of sorts. Each week, I would sit on my porch, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, as the rain drizzled on the roof above, creating a comforting soundtrack of muted rain patters and distant thunder rumbles. The street, with its slick, glistening pavement, took on a different hue. Each drop of water seemed to wash away not just the grime of the day but also the tension that had once hovered between James and me. I would think back to that moment when I looked him in the eyes and saw the hurt festering beneath the surface, beneath our laughter and easy banter, like an unresolved question lurking in the shadows. It was in this quiet space of reflection that I learned the importance of humility and accountability, both to myself and to those closest to me. I never forgot that debt, the $60 that, at one point, felt insurmountable, almost like a millstone around my neck. Yet that very symbol of conflict became a mirror, prompting a deeper inquiry into how I navigated my relationships. James and I began to spend more time together, engaging in long talks that seemed endless under the canopy of evening stars or the dim, warm glow of a dimmed living room. We would play board games, dive into old movies, and explore our small town's hidden gems, often with laughter trailing behind us like a kite on a gentle breeze. Those moments drew out a connection I hadn't known we'd lacked before. Conversations became more meaningful, filled with genuine inquiries into each other's lives, worries, and dreams. There was a palpable shift. The unspoken tension was replaced with a camaraderie built on shared experiences and vulnerability. No longer did I feel the burden of that $60. Instead, it served as the catalyst for deeper exchanges. One particularly rainy Thursday, as we sipped our drinks and watched the clouds roll in, I opened up. "You know, I used to think friendship was just about hanging out and having fun, James. But I realize now it's about the tough stuff too, like debts and misunderstandings. I really appreciate how we've navigated through all of that. It brought us closer." He nodded, looking pensive, and then he smiled softly. I have to admit, I felt awkward about it, too. It wasn't just the money, it was what it represented. I don't want to feel like I'm holding something over you when all I really want is your company. The honesty hung in the air, wrapping around us like the comforting embrace of the warm sweaters we wore. I chuckled at the absurdity of how a financial transaction had morphed into a vehicle for deeper understanding. James reached for his phone, and with a twinkle in his eye, he pulled up a meme that perfectly encapsulated our journey, and we erupted into laughter, once again transported to a place where our bond felt effortless. That evening, the rain intensified, pounding against windows like a drum, but instead of keeping us boxed in, it felt liberating, an orchestra accompanying our newfound harmony. As the weeks turned into months, I cherished those Thursdays, never missing a chance to reconnect and nurture our friendship. I even made a mental note to repay the $60, but truthfully, it mattered less and less with each passing conversation. The emphasis shifted from debt to conversation, from obligation to connection. In a way, our playful banter transformed into discussions that danced around deeper themes, life, love, aspirations, and I began to realize that money and obligations are mere facets of a much larger picture. One evening, James surprised me with an early birthday celebration, a small gathering with close friends. As we settled in with laughter and stories, I felt a sense of belonging wash over me, filling the gaps that I'd sometimes not even noticed existed. In that warm glow, I leaned over and whispered to James, "Hey, I owe you something." He looked at me quizzically, his eyebrow raised, and I continued, this deep sense of gratitude for helping me see what truly matters. He just chuckled and nudged me playfully, a silent acknowledgement of our journey together. Though the rainy Thursdays still came, they carried a different energy now. They were soaked in laughter, born of warmth, and threaded with the beautiful realization that sometimes a rough patch can lead to a tapestry of richer connections. And though I never explicitly paid him back that $60, what emerged was far more valuable, an understanding that true friendship transcends financial debts, weaving an everlasting bond that brightens even the darkest of days. Perhaps, in its own way, that really was a payment worth cherishing. In the weeks that followed, I found myself smiling each time I heard the gentle patter of rain against my window. What used to feel monotonous now evoked an aurora of warmth in my heart. Those rainy Thursdays transformed into a cherished routine. I could almost hear the rain whispering secrets of camaraderie while I shuffled into my living room, bundled in a cozy blanket, a steaming mug of tea cradled in my hands. My phone buzzed to life, and a familiar name lit up the screen: Lucas. We had developed our own rhythm, a dance of banter and understanding that flowed easily, aided by shared memories and laughter. "Hey, you ready for our rain date?" the text read. Smiling to myself, I replied with a quick always. As I threw on my favorite hoodie, ready to dive into yet another cozy chapter of our friendship. Lucas arrived shortly after, a playful grin plastered across his face. "I brought snacks," he announced, producing a crinkly bag of popcorn and some gummy bears as if they were the treasures of a long-lost expedition. Settled on my couch, we slipped into our ritual, Netflix binging through the dreariest of mean days, outlining an adventure. Dipping into the surreal and the comedic, tracing myriad twists across genres, just like our conversations. And as the rain continued its serenade outside, something curious happened. Each time we laughed, each time we shared a meaningful look or a story from our past, I often found myself reflecting on the emotional balance we'd struck, threading through memories that we hadn't quite explored before. "I was thinking about that one time you tried to teach me how to cook," Lucas teased, nudging my shoulder. "You nearly burnt the house down." We both erupted in laughter, the shared embarrassment that once lurked in the corners now an emblem of progress, of understanding we had built upon one another's vulnerabilities. "Hey, don't forget I saved our lives from those flaming pancakes," I countered, recalling the chaos with a smirk. He shot back an exaggerated gasp, mock horror in his eyes. "I wouldn't call them pancakes. They were more like edible hockey pucks," I laughed harder, each taunt adding another layer to the fabric of our friendship. But nestled amid all the joy was something heavier, lurking just beneath the surface, a quiet contemplation about the essence of our exchanges. I had been hesitant to confront the emotional complexities that lay intertwined with our shared experiences. It was Lucas who finally led me there, unknowingly yet gently. With the popcorn bowl long emptied and the final credits rolling on yet another movie, I found myself breaking the easy banter, wanting to lay bare a thought that had occupied my mind. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about that $60, I said, sifting through my memories. "It's strange, but I feel like it became this little anchor for me, a symbol of how we needed that moment back then." Lucas turned to me, and his gaze grew serious. "You really don't need to feel guilty about that. I mean, we've moved past it, haven't we?" His voice was gentle, yet firm, a guiding light through the murkier waters. "But I appreciate that you're thinking of it differently now." The honesty in his tone ignited a flicker of warmth inside me. It showed me how fragile friendships can feel, how they can be caught up in miscommunications or assumptions. But it also reminded me of how imperative it is to find that empathy, to seek understanding instead of cementing a line between us. We lingered in that silence, where nothing needed to be filled with words as the calming sound of raindrops on the window enveloped us. But as if carrying the weight of that moment, I reached for him, causing a spontaneous whirlwind of revelations to unspool between us. "Thank you for being patient with me through all that. What are friends for?" He shrugged, smiling softly, yet the sincerity rippled through his eyes, anchoring me in the moment. That revealed something profound within me. The comfort of connection we had both nurtured through our shared antics and deep conversations was everything I had truly needed, more than any monetary value ever could hold. I realized that it wasn't about erasing the debt, nor tying it neatly with a bow, but about celebrating the transformation it had invoked in us. And as we settled into a more comfortable silence, I felt a lightness wash over me, the previously heavy air of expectations gently dispersing into something far richer. Fast forward again to another rainy Thursday, it was becoming my favorite sanctuary each week. This time, I felt the soft tickle of excitement ripple through my veins as Lucas arrived with a new bottle of board games and tales ready to unfurl. We played, we teased, and we occasionally drifted into deeper conversations, additional layers of our lives revealed moment by moment. In the end, I didn't need to pay him back. Instead, the debt faded, replaced instead by a tapestry of trust woven through shared experiences, a deeper connection that shimmered more brightly than any money exchanged could manage. And through the seemingly mundane, fragile threads of rainy Thursdays, we built a bond that could weather any storm, eager and ready for whatever lay ahead.